If you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Warfield has some thank yous.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just want to check one thing, people on WebEx, if you can give me a thumbs up to make sure that you're hearing. Okay, thank you. And also just to remind you that the best way that the WebEx works is that when moderator calls on you to give it a minute, not a minute, a second, and then we can make sure from the soundboard we will get you up, and then make sure you say your name and your precinct, and then ask your question. Also, to start off with, I just wanted to remind you by way of thanking the people who are involved in making this hybrid meeting work. From the schools, John Middleton and Jose DeSouza for providing kind of the high-level tech support, IT basic setup. From the town IT department, Jim Rounds, Casey Silva, and Linda Bellavia, who have come in, set up all the computers and everything for us, as well as are monitoring the meeting during the whole time from a technology computer standpoint. And then from town staff, Linda McNeil, Kristen Midgley, Kate O'Shea, Dan McCormick, and Jennifer Gelinas, who are serving different functions, signing you in, whether you're in person or on the WebEx, as well as monitoring, doing tech support, getting people on WebEx if they need assistance, and just in general monitoring things like the Facebook feed so that I'm text when there's questions or issues. Also the BCAT staff with Jennifer Dodge and Chris Flaherty, who are working tonight to make sure that that connection works well. And from BCAT also Rob Zahora, who is their engineer, who really worked this afternoon on getting everything hopefully refined. And then for the AV staff tonight, we have Casper McKinnick, Lindsay Lavoie, and Joe Moscato, who are running the mics and helping out. And I have John Porter, who is riding the soundboard. He's the man who, when you get called on, gets it moved to the right spot. So again, it really just takes a few moments for everybody. If you just pause after you're called on, he'll get the right person, the right mic on. All of the mics are on. You do not need to turn them on when you get them. They will be on. Just pause for a moment. Then the sound will be turned to that mic. If you notice, they have nice little colored heads on them so we can identify and get you on sound. The last thing, too, is that we also had another sound engineer helping us on Wednesday and Monday, Eric Kilburn. So I just want to thank all those people for the hard work that they've done to get this meeting running. And lastly, I do want to thank all of you town meeting members for showing up. It's a longer meeting than we have a lot of times, but 4 nights. I think we can get it done tonight. And whether you're here in person or on WebEx, the time that you've taken and the efforts and everything that you've done with preparing and getting ready for the meeting and then being here for 4 nights, I want to thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Amy. As you can tell, it's not a trivial exercise to put a hybrid meeting together, and these folks have done some extra hard work to make sure this works for us. Before we get started, I would like to ask for a moment of silence. Mimi Kelly, a member of who served here on town meeting, and is Jack Kelly's wife, just passed away, so if we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And before we get cranking, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. You people are participating in an historical event. 50 years ago was the first Burlington Representative Town Meeting. So this has been going on now for, well, this is our 51st year, I suppose, of doing this. So I'll take a bow. We've made it this far. Okay, we'll start with Article 35. Zoning bylaw amendment and map amendment to create a new zoning district to be called the Town Center Multifamily TCM District. And we will discuss this along with Article 36, but we will vote them separately. Article 36 is the amend the zoning map, Town Center overlay map, and rezoning property to the Town Center Multifamily District. Article 35 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and it is as printed in the warrant. Yes, do we have a recommendation from Planning Board? Do we have nobody from Planning Board here? We can't discuss this without a recommendation from the Planning Board. I understand the issue with Kristen, but there was supposed to be someone from the board here to discuss.
You cannot take it up without a recommendation from the board.
Mr. Gaffney, can you speak for the Planning Board? They have to speak. Thank you.
All right. Okay, we've got two items before the planning board. This is for the Town Center multifamily, and this is one item for the zoning amendment for Article 3 districts, Article 4 use regulations, and Article 8 overlay districts, 8.5 Town Center, to create a new zoning district, the Town Center multifamily. That was favorably approved 230.
Thank you.
230 for favorable.
So it's is it 230 on both Articles 35 and 30?
It is not. So the second article, this is the other article for the specific lot for the zoning there, which was 135, 137, 137R, and it looks like maybe 141, shown on the proposed rezoning. So this is the map of the specific lots. And that particular one was approved for 410.
So the votes were 230 and 410.
Let me check that one out. That's four. I have down here.
One abstention, might have been 4-0.
I believe that member Raymond actually said no because he wanted the town meeting to say. He didn't abstain.
He abstained.
No. Yeah, that's a 410 on the second one. Yep. And it was a 230 on the first one. So Paul again voted no on it. Yep.
Okay, so it's 230 on Article 35 and 410 on Article 36. Is that correct?
No, I don't have the articles here, but if the specific lot one was 410, the general one was 230.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get cranking, there is an amendment to 35, which is some minor language at the end of it. I'd like to get this taken care of so it's out of the way. Can we put that language up, Amy? For the amendment? Does everybody have the language, the amendment? No, probably not. No. It's just a footnote? Is that all that is?
It's a correction of the footnote. It's a change of the footnote.
Mr. Bell. Wait for a microphone, please, Mr. Bell.
Roger Bell, Precinct 6. I find this highly unjudicious and very nerve-wracking that the planning board doesn't have people here to represent something as important as this as far as the town center goes.
Yeah, we will speak on it.
Yeah, we
will
got
wait
two
for
planning board
presentation.
members here. I'm vice chair.
Except that you don't seem to have in order what we're supposed to be,
I've got it right here.
what we know about.
Yeah, we've got it right here. We had the meetings, we voted on it. I just had to get my stuff together here, so I got this at the last minute just to present, so I apologize for not having it very handy, but there was someone that was sick, I'm happy to do it.
I'm not comfortable with the way this is starting out. I'm just, this whole thing, and then the amendment, what's going on with the amendment?
We're going to move on without the amendment. We'll take care of that at the end. Oops, here we
Thank you,
go.
Mr. Moderator.
It is a simple change to a footnote at the very end. It was presented, it's been moved by Ms. Ellis. Do I have a second? Does the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee wish to speak on this, Ms. Ellis? Let's see if we can get this meeting going.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Oh, thank you. Shari Ellis, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee and Precinct 3 member. So the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, quickly for new members and a refresher for old members, reviews any zoning amendment that comes to the town for clarity, conciseness, to make sure that it's all complete in the text. And in our review of this, we presented an amendment to this. It's simply just to make the footnote more readable, I guess, if it's the case. So it's a simple text amendment to a footnote in the regulation chart. And our vote on this amendment 30 or Article 35 was as amended 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Any questions on this amendment? Ms. Byer, do you have something addition to say that your chair of that committee has not already said? You need a microphone, please.
Kathy Byer, Precinct 2, and I just wanted to clarify, we changed just a couple words for clarity, where it said before that except as permitted as of a right, and we inserted the word only, so only in the case of a TCM district, and then instead of following the words subject to town meeting rezoning. So I just wanted to clarify that we fixed the language to make it clear that any changes in this district would come back to town meeting for a vote before going forward. And we just clarified that. Would that be accurate, Ms. Ellis? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, let's put this to a vote. All those in favor? Amy, do we have a poll going out? Okay. All those opposed? Thank you. There being a unanimous vote in favor of this, the amendment passes. So let's move on to a discussion on the amended article. For Article 35. Sir, I'll turn it over to you.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, my name's Peter Carboni. I'm a principal at Mbta Real Estate Ventures. We're a Boston-based real estate firm, and I happen to live in Woburn, just next door, and have been at many town meetings when I was a practicing attorney here with my good friends Mark Vaughn, Bob Buckley, and Harold Dulong, for those of you who may remember Harold. So we're here tonight we think is a great product. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it as you have walked in. We've been here for the last number of nights. I'll try to keep this brief. I know this is the fourth night, and we're getting off to a little bit of a slow start. So let me go through this pretty quick, and then whatever questions you all have, we're here. First, thank you to all the boards. We've been at about 15, 16 meetings with the town. So what you're going to see today is sort of a culmination of a lot of different meetings, input from neighbors, from the planning board, from Sherry's board, David Webb's board, the planning board, selectmen, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of input has gone into this. My partner, who's here with me, Jeff Feldman, who started the project over a year ago. The project actually started off as a little bit different, even a larger project that has come full circle. So what you're going to see today is the culmination of a lot of different meetings with everybody. So first, this is just quick what we're doing. We're going to talk about who are we, why we're here, the project, and then the zoning. So let's go in through that. We have a great team. It includes my friends from Reamer, as well as the guys at Bowler, Cube 3. I won't go through everybody on the list, but it's a terrific team. I've developed things here with them in Burlington and many places elsewhere. So enough said on the team. Again, on who we are, we're local. You're going to hear two different names. Mbta Real Estate Ventures is a firm I started 12 years ago with my partners. We're all four local guys from the Boston area. We recently merged into my sister company called Foxfield Real Estate. So if you see Foxfield, it's the same company. We operate from Boston down to Florida. We had a second company that was from doing a lot in the Mid-Atlantic. We merged them together. We're going by Foxfield. We're all from Greater Boston. We've all got 25, 30 years of experience. We were all at firms like National Development, who you all know from town, have done a lot of great things here. I was the point on Arbor Point over at Seven Springs. So that most of you probably weren't on town meeting. That was 2004 when I stood on the podium here and we talked about that one. Taurus, Reamer, AEW, Archstone, some of the other firms. We've done over 50 million square feet of real estate deals. We currently manage about 4 million square feet. And I've got about $1 billion worth of development deals under development right now. Everything from residential to industrial up and down the East Coast. And again, at the bottom one here. So while I was an attorney at Reamer, worked on a lot of projects, including the former Sutton campus, which Todd is going to talk to you guys about after this one on some exciting things that have happened on that over the last number of years. But Long Meadow Place, one of the assisted living facilities, and Arbor Point, as we said. These are just a couple of representative properties. The one on the left is actually in Winchester. That's the Winning Home. Some of you may know that. That's on the Winning Home site. Winning Home is in Woburn, Lexington, and Winchester. We built 30 townhouse condominiums over in Winchester. So this is really just to show you the quality of what we've done. The one on the right is about an 8-unit building that we did down in Hanover. We currently have about 500 units in various stages of permitting and development. So that's enough about us. Why are we here? So I think you're all fairly familiar. We've probably talked to a lot of you about where this property is. Come out here, take a left, go up Cambridge Street. The property is about three or four properties right up the street. It's the former, it's the Rogers Piano site now and the adjacent. There's actually about 3 parcels that make up the site, including property owned by the Sorensen family. Shown here on the left, you can see sort of the proximity to where it is on Cambridge Street in relation to the town common. And the one on the right, a little bit closer view. Probably just to point out, noteworthy on here is the closeness of the existing building, especially the right-hand slide, the building on the back that is basically built on the back property line, which we will be moving forward. Why are we here? We really want to turn this, which is the slides and the boards you guys have seen outside. This is the imagery. There's no reason that this property should look like this in your great town now or for very long. And we want to turn it into something much better than that. This is the project. This has been designed by Cube 3. They design a lot of residential in the Boston market. They're a terrific design firm. It's by no means 100% done, but I think it's a great looking project with some great architecture. We'll go through some of the design landscape issues and so forth. So let's talk about what is the project. So these are some bullets, which I will try not to do many bullets because it's easier to see and better to see pictures, but what is it? So the project would be up a maximum of 82 units, and they're condominium for sale units. They're not apartments. So we will not be doing apartments. We're going to talk about a development agreement that we've already signed with the Board of Selectmen, which puts a lot of these things, it locks them down. This is what we're doing. So it's 82 units, it's condos. There's about 13, the bylaw, you have a zoning bylaw that requires, it's basically 15% affordable units. So we will be doing what's required under the bylaw, which is, in this case, would be about 13 units. As far as tax revenue generated, we would generate probably about $550,000 a year in tax revenue. The property today generates about 72,000, 74,000, somewhere in that range. So your net is about another 475 annually over today. That doesn't take into account, when we get into a full-blown fiscal study like I've done in the past, things like if there were school-age kids, this product is really designed. It's not age-restricted. We're not looking for it to be. I don't believe the town is. But it's going to largely play off of people that are empty nesters, or it can play off anybody. But the product here is drive under, so you have a covered space, take your elevator up to your floor, and there's no stairs in the unit. It's all just single floor living. There's a possibility we may do a couple of lofty units, but that's beside the point. So if you end up, you will likely, statistically nationally, you end up with about 6 to 7 kids per 100 units in facilities. I would venture to say this will even be less because of what I believe the owner type will be here in terms of empty nester, but something to think about. Building permit fees, I&I fees are almost another $600,000 that will be generated. Just quickly, we don't need to go through all these other bullets. You have a master plan. We've gone through it. We've gone through the design guidelines. A lot of what you see in the design is from your own master plan and your design guidelines for things like the gable roofs, the colonial architecture, keeping in the architecture with what you have in the town. I think it's a terrific site in terms of what you have for commercial on Cambridge, and then the single family out to the back and off the adjacent streets. We just think it's a terrific multifamily site. The next slide shows the site from a bird's eye view. You can see the building is really an H. You can see the large area in the front. So a couple things on that large landscaped area. It is a wetland, so it's not very attractive right now, but it is a regulated wetland. So we are going to beautify it and enhance it up front. So it'll be, it'll have a really nice landscaped garden in the front as an amenity for the property as well as for the town. And as you drive by, some people have asked me about contamination. There was some contamination on this site. I'll say allegedly by Shell because I don't know exactly, but the gas station up the street. But it has been cleaned up, and I've looked at all the reports. It's clean. It happens to be in the area where that wetland was, and it's fenced off now. So as you all drive by it, you've probably seen it. No issue on the contamination anymore. Nobody should be concerned. If I were concerned, I wouldn't be building residential. The outback, you can see if you go back to the other for 1 second, Amy, I'm sorry. You can see the red line is the the setback that's required under the zoning bylaw of 50 feet, which we really are not doing anything other than landscaping. There might be a walking trail through there, but we're not anticipating any improvements within that 50 foot. And the building itself is about 88 feet from the rear lot line at its closest point. Again, today the closest point is probably 10 feet, the building that exists there today. So we're going to be pulling that forward substantially. The next one just gives you, so when we talk, this is really just to show where the parking is. So this is how the building is really set up. That's parking, that's under a podium. You will never see it from the front. You'll go in, it'll be open air on 2 or 3 sides of it, and just go in, take the elevator up to the next floor. The next rendering shows the building from the back side, from the back. This lower level of this is a parking garage. So this is only 2 stories of housing. To the top of the roof line here in the back is 33 to 35 feet. That's all. I've heard people say it's 60 feet, 70 feet in the back. It's not. It's 33 feet in the back to the top of that roof line. Great. I think it's fantastic architecture. It's still being refined. There is the roof deck, that deck sits on top of the podium, and it will be greened up. So there'll be trees and other things out there accessible for the residents out there. But this will basically be the view. This is taken from an elevation as well, a little bit up high. But this height, I'm going to show you some height comparisons as we continue along. The landscaping, again, don't need to harp on this. We talked a little bit about it. This just shows some of we're very vested in terms of, and cognizant in terms of, landscaping. Do a great job. We have a great landscape architect on the team who's already working with us. This will go through Concom review, design review, et cetera, et cetera. The next slide shows really the heights of the building. So that's the existing building on the left, 33 feet high, not a very attractive building. It also is on the sidewalk. So it is basically 0 feet off of your right-of-way today. The building on the right is ours. It's set back about 15 feet from the street, from the sidewalk, I should say. The first 2 levels are about 22 feet, and it's about 33 feet to the top of that third living floor, with a maximum height all the way to the top of 45. When you measure height under the zoning bylaw, it's not going to be 45. It's more like 38 because it's the mean grade around. Glad to get into the technicalities if you want, but we are not asking for any waivers, variances for height. We're within compliance of that. The next slide actually shows some comparisons. This is a terrific project. I think Mr. Murray did this. It's a great project. He did down on Cambridge Street across from CVS. This is just to give you a comparison. The height there is about 55 feet, and it's right on the street. Again, we'll be 10 feet lower than that and set back from it, as well as our building is much deeper than, as you all may know. This one's pretty much right up on the street. Our building will not feel as much of, they did a great job with that. I'm not saying anything negative about theirs at all. It's just going to be a little bit of a different feel because it's a little bit more up on the street as compared to what ours will be. And the last one that we're showing on height just shows the comparison of one of the buildings right next door to us, basically. This is on the other side of the KinderCare. So if you come out of here, I think it's your first or second property that you'll hit. So we'll be about the same, it'll be the same height as that. As far as traffic, traffic comes with real estate projects. As everybody knows, we are very cognizant of that. I'd like to just maybe go through a couple of salient points. The current use, there's about 23,000 square feet of retail and industrial space on that site today. Part of the issue right now is that we've all been conditioned to the fact that there's almost no use on that site right now. So there's like no traffic coming off of that site. If it were used for what it is zoned for today, and you don't tear those buildings down and you just use them, you'd be generating about 426 vehicle trips per day today, and about 87 weekday and 42 peak hours. And that's basically, I think it's 17,000 of retail, and then the rest of it industrial. If say our project doesn't go forward and the seller says, well, what do we do with this? They have the right to develop retail and other uses. You could fit about 30,000 square feet by right. The retail can only be 10,000 square feet before you need a special permit, but you could do 3 retailers of 9,900 square feet each. So you could do 30,000 square feet. Just based on ITE numbers, which some of you may be familiar with, you generate over 2,000 vehicle trips per day. That's as of right. So that's an example of what could happen if you don't do residential if they want to come in and do something as of right. So it's just a comparison. The third bullet here, ours would generate, I think it's going to be a little under this number. This says 602. I think we'll end up in somewhere between 575 and 600 vehicle trips per day, and actually would be a reduction in peak hour traffic over the vehicle trips that would be generated if it were developed for one of the other uses. We have done a traffic, I will call it assessment. It's not a full-blown study. We will do a full-blown traffic study as part of the planning board process, as we go forward. To get at from a zoning perspective, so that's basically the project, and I went through it quick. I'm glad to go through a lot of that. If the project goes through tonight, we still have to go through design review, site plan approval, conservation approval. So it doesn't end here if you approve this tonight. There's still things that we'll be going through. Let's talk about zoning and really why are we here, right? So this project, multifamily is not allowed today on this site. We are in one of the town center overlay zones. So for those of you who may have been on town meeting back in '06, you established two different zones, and they're shown here. One is the general business district, shown, I'll call it more of the pinkish color, and the other purple is the civic center. Think of the civic center as the town common, things like probably the town hall, your library, those type of things. Nothing's really going to ever happen with those from a zoning perspective, in my opinion. The other sites they could be up and down Terry Ave, it could be things like where Shaw's is, and then our site on the lower where the Star is, that's where our site is. So our site sits in the general business overlay, the central business overlay district today. So the multifamily, which used to be allowed, was rescinded back in 2010. So it was allowed in 2006. Mr. Murray's project was done, a few others, the Building 19 project was done, residential was done. I think at the time there was a thought, we'd like to see a little bit more mixed use. We weren't getting enough. It's been 10 to 12 years. So the thought here is it a good idea to start building up a little bit more housing within the town center? This is really the subject of what we're here for from a zoning perspective. One is, if the project looks great, that's great, but how do you zone it? So the way that we propose to rezone it is to create an overlay, if you will, that sits on top of the overlay. So Article 35 creates a new overlay zone that only sits on top of what I'll call is the pink zone. So the way it would work is, if you approve Article 35, you've created a zone that's called the Town Center Multifamily District. It's an overlay on top of the overlay. Nothing happens within it until someone like me brings forth a property and asks you to rezone it into that. That's Article 36. So with 35, you're going to create, if you would approve it, you're going to create the overlay, but nobody can build residential within the pink until they come to you and say, hey, we want to build residential and here's how we're going to do it. And that's what we're proposing again with Article 36. There's a development agreement that goes hand in hand with the rezoning. And the reason for that, if Article 35 passes, you create the overlay. If Article 36 passes, you've rezoned the site that we'd like to buy or the sites to allow the residential on that parcel. The development agreement that, again, we've negotiated with the help of Lisa Mead on behalf of the town and the Board of Selectmen, these are the major salient points. Again, these are all things I've already reiterated. These are in the development agreement. It's signed by the Board of Selectmen. It really only becomes effective once Article 36 is approved. If Article 36 is approved, this doesn't matter. But the two of them, the zoning and the development agreement, really hang together as one. So if someone wants to come forth and rezone a property within the central business district going forward, they will almost have, I can't say they likely going to have to do a development agreement, or this body is not going to agree to rezone that property into residential. So when you approve Article 36, you're doing it with these restrictions already in place, because I signed an agreement with the town saying, I will do condominiums, the affordability is actually in your zoning bylaw, but it's reiterated here. One of the things that didn't mention, I think, as part of the ground floor plane, there's 2 entranceways to the parcel, and I forgot to mention that one of those is going to be closed off for emergency egress and access only. That's in the development agreement. So we won't have 2 driveways. We'll have 1 driveway. Those are the major things. We will still go to the planning board. We will, I'm sure, get questions on traffic and other development things that will come up. But these are the things we can't change. And if I don't go ahead, or if I didn't, somebody still has to develop it under this regime, or they would have to come back and seek approval from you. So to kind of summarize I guess if you go to this slide. So this sort of kind of puts it all back, bring it all back into put the genie back in the bottle. 35 will create the zone. 36 would rezone ours into the TCM district under the strict requirements of the development agreement. And then if we get approved, again, we still have to go for design review and the other permits that I mentioned. And again, if anybody in the town center, I'll use an example of the Shaw's property. If somebody said, I think developing on the Shaw's property would be great, they can't just do, even though they sit in the central business district, they would have to get rezoned into the overlay. So they would have to come to you. So I want to dispel any rumors that if you do this, you're rezoning everything in the town to allow for residential. You're not. You have to come back on a case-by-case basis to this body to say, we'd like to get it rezoned. So what you're really approving tonight, you would be creating the legislation through Article 35 for the zoning bylaw, and then 36 is really targeted towards the project. So, Mr. Moderator, I think that's the presentation. I'm glad to answer any questions that you have or any of the members have.
Thank you. Could we have the vote and any comments on land use, please? Mr. Webb.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Webb, Precinct 7 Land Use Chair. We voted 5-0-1 on both of these articles. We felt the developer did a very good job of dealing with issues we brought up during the many sessions we had with them, and we feel that this is just about the best use of this property for the town, considering that this area will be developed by somebody sometime, and we felt this was a good use for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Is there anything additional the planning board wishes to say?
Hello? Yep.
Mr. Mpemba.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a couple of things. I don't know how much history everybody in the room knows at this point in time, but I'll just give you a quick history of it. You know, just over 20 years ago, I think, I actually initiated the Downtown 3A committee that was actually ultimately, years of work, ended up voting in the was what presented the overlay and created the downtown overlay and the all of the regulations and criteria that went along with it. So there's been a lot of discussion over the years about the different segments of 3A and what areas we'd like to see retail, what areas we'd like to see. I guess one of the thoughts with the 3A committee initially was we're going to have to create some. Initially, we could create some residential down with the retail down there in order to make it, to bring it a viable downtown. So I think at the beginning of it, and the history of that was the beginning of that, I think initially when the overlay first got voted in, a lot of the applicants started coming forward and just doing the residential, and I think that it scared the town a little bit to the point where they felt it was only going to be residential development down there, and that really wasn't the spirit of the overlay. The spirit of the overlay was to have mixed use and create a viable and a thriving downtown center. So that's when they kind of put the close on the residential piece of it down there. What's been discussed on this particular piece of property along the 3A corridor is it's just outside of what we consider the the business district, which we kind of isolated as the district down, as you go down the hill from where the Building 19 site was and start heading down as the business district. Up above, as he said, was the civic or the municipal district. This kind of skips over, and then it creates a business, is within the business district again. But it really is not, it's not an area that we ever really looked at as going to be as a viable retail area, for multiple reasons. And one of them, which is the biggest reason, is that, you know, the retail is going to generate about, as Peter said, it would generate probably 3 times the amount of traffic in what we consider the most sensitive traffic area along 3A. So it's more of a, you know, when we look at that use, what potentially could be built there right now by right versus the residential use that is being presented by the applicant right now, it's kind of a, you know, it's kind of a no-brainer when, you know, when you look at the amount of traffic that could be generated and what will be generated with this, and what this will accomplish to further the goals of what the 3A committee initially wanted, was to create some viable foot traffic downtown and things like that. So, you know, all of that considered, I think it was kind of, you know, one of those things. Do we do a mixed use on there? Do we do a, so there were different options, you know, mixed use or a strictly retail use or a residential use. The residential use is the one that is before us here, is obviously the least amount of traffic will be generated. We've worked with a lot of these applicants along the way, you know, from one end of 3A to the other end of 3A. You know, my experience with Novaya is that Novaya has come in my opinion, with the spirit of the overlay as far as design and all the criteria that goes along with it, much more compliant than any of the other applicants, you know, that we've dealt with along the you know, the whole 20 years, virtually 20 years that the overlay has been in place. So if town meeting does vote favorably on these, we know they're gonna have to come back before us, you know, before anything gets built over there, and we're gonna have to work with them again. You know, my thoughts, and I think I've spoken many times about this piece of it, is that, you know, when you can find a builder that's as amenable to, you know, to our considerations and our requests and our demands that they have been, that's the type of builder we would like to work with. So as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a great project. I think there was at least a particular abutter that initially was very vocal against the project. Once he actually found out what could have gone there and sat down with the applicant and got comfortable with what the applicant was going to do, that abutter is now in favor of the project. So I don't know if there's anything that, you know, I could answer for you as far as the history of the 3A, this particular applicant or anything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mpemba. Okay.
Just want to, if I could.
Well, really only like one person from a body speaking. Do you have something additional?
I do. The planning director actually is online, so if anyone has questions for her as well. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
If we have questions for her, then we will go to her. Questions from the body now. Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. There's a few things that I'd like to point out that kind of concern me with both of these. A number of years ago, we had the proposal for the overlay, the downtown. And being born and raised here, the whole issue, which was very contentious at the time, was there was a certain area that the predominant amount of townspeople wanted to have cleaned up. So we were promised a village-type community. People would walk. We'd have wide sidewalks. We'd have gas lanterns, benches. It was going to be beautiful. Trees. It was just wonderful. So 2/3 of town meeting voted in favor of it, and it was called into question, if people recall, with a special election, I believe. And when the taxpayers came out to vote, it was a 50-50 split. So town meeting wasn't too good at judging the pulse of the taxpayer at the time. And there were numerous questions and concerns back then as to the size and scope of the overlay. That particular area came into question numerous times with some of the town hall meetings that we had. Why we were encompassing such a wide swath of property when the main area that people were concerned with was downtown. So it got voted in by a very slim majority. I think it was 55 votes, if I recall, out of 5,000. So the town was basically evenly split as far as whether they wanted this overlay to begin with. We were told that this was very well thought out, that the planning board, planning department, everyone spent countless hours talking to developers, talking to God knows who, and that this was a wonderful setup. I've always been concerned with a PDD or overlay, and when it's sold to the taxpayer or sold to town meeting, and we're told this is what we're going to get, and then we keep moving the goalpost, and we say, well, we'll kind of pick a little section out of it and we'll change it. Well, that's not what the taxpayers voted for, number one. There was a serious issue over the years with a lot of these overlays and the PDDs, as everyone should know, or that's been around here for a while, and that is every time we were proposed, the thing changed drastically. So there were provisions voted in to stop that any changes had to be minimal at best. So we would stop this, well, we'll just kind of vote it in and then we'll change it as time goes on. And again, that's not what the taxpayers voted for. I've always had an issue with that, and regardless of the project, you know, I've always found that it tends to become a little bit more of a slippery slope. So now we're sectioning out this parcel. What's going to stop the parcel down by the storage area where really isn't on the main road? And what's going to stop someone from coming before us and saying, you know what, you allowed the one project, why are we not being allowed to do the same down here? There's an awful lot of property that can happen to, and yet we still don't have the beautiful storefronts right up to the street with the apartments above and the retail below to anchor it. And I could have brought it tonight and shown everyone the beautiful pictures of what we were supposed to have downtown, God knows how many years ago, and we're not even remotely close to having what was voted in. So I'm concerned about what we're actually doing, why we keep on wanting to sell the taxpayer one item and then change it on them when that's not exactly what they voted for. I've also been concerned as time goes on with some of the housing issues that we keep on talking about. Early on the first night, as everyone recalls, we talk about the taxes. 2/3 of our tax base basically comes from commercial. So the residential portion of it really doesn't benefit this town tax-wise and revenue-wise as much as a residential component would. The demands on it, as far as I've been told and seen over the years, we have a certain demand that would be placed on the town with the residential aspect of it, as would be commercial. But we're talking about building new schools. How many people would actually, how many children would come out of that particular development? So there are all kinds of, I would say, adverse effects that might impact us that we're not giving due consideration for. So I personally can't support this, again, for numerous reasons, but it just doesn't sit well with me that we've gotten to this point with that overlay, and there's nothing to be shown for it except everything has been housing. We haven't seen basically one thing other than, what, a bank and the healthcare where the Exxon used to be?
Mr. Cormier, you're getting a little bit wide from our focus here.
Well, I'm just trying to point out that we have a lot of housing that was supposed to be put in there already.
You said that. Let's
And
move it on, please.
and we were promised a certain amount of retail, which we haven't.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Mpemba, do you want to address that very quickly, please?
I will make it very quick. I actually take exception to some of the things that you said, John, because when you say nothing was done down there, for a year and a half, I literally worked with the people at Building 19 before we even allowed them to come before the planning board. What they wanted to put in there, you wouldn't want to look at. And what this allowed us to do was to get the project that you're looking at in there today, which is beautiful. So that's one big project. That was a huge site. This is a huge site. We've worked with the people on this site prior to this, and unfortunately, the people that currently own the site, they were actually supposed to, they've gone beyond the period of time that they were supposed to rehab that front building because the retail piece of it just isn't working for them. So the last thing in the world I want to have happen is to put another retail site this far out of the business district and to let it fail, and then we're going to look at a bunch of vacant buildings in there. So it didn't work for the people that are in there right now. They were supposed to rehab prior to this. A couple of years ago, they were supposed to have the full rehab done on that. They financially weren't able to do it. So, you know, clearly this site is meant to be residential. That's, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a better transition from the district that it's coming from to where it's going. It's a much better transition anyways, aside from the fact that it's a much less traffic use than what a retail would be in over there. As far as and I'm only going to be 1 second longer, but as far as the residential piece of it, this body is what stopped the residential from continuing to grow in there. And the residential is what's going to make it viable. You need to bring residential properties, every town around, from Winchester to Lexington, they're putting residential developments in the centers of town because that's what brings the viability to the centers of town. It's what brings it causes the retail to thrive. You need to have residential properties within walking distance of the retail, or it's not going to thrive. So that's kind of the whole, when you look at the whole plan, yeah, there's a whole big plan to it. As I said years ago, I actually switched over to the planning board because the planning board, once we passed the overlay, was the board that implemented it. And if I told you, if I gave you a dime for every time we've literally fought with applicants because of the junk they wanted to put in, and the people that voted against it came to me afterwards and said, what a beautiful building. Well, it didn't go without, it didn't just happen by itself. It happened because of the work of the planning board and the people who put the overlay in to begin with. So I think the overlay has done is, we don't own any of that land down there. If the town wants to buy it, I'd like to see this as a field forever. It's not going to happen. We got to look at the realities, and we have to deal with the realities. And when you keep saying taxpayer, it really has nothing to do with a taxpayer. It has to do with the residents, and what do the residents want? And I think the residents, every time they drive by a Building 19 site and look at what it was and what it is now, hopefully it'll be viable at one point in time, and it'll be thriving. But I don't think there's any question that the overlay has done its work. And I think it's a phenomenal project, and I take exception to anyone who says that the overlay isn't doing what it was meant to do. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. No, we're moving on to discuss this project. We've discussed the overlay district. John, we're not talking about the overlay district. John, we are moving away from the overlay district. We are talking about this project. I've given you plenty of leeway. I gave Mr. Mpemba a little more leeway than I should. It's time to move on to this project that's ancillary to the overlay district. He told you he disagreed. That was it. He didn't, it was not a personal attack on you. Now please sit down or leave the meeting. It's time to move on. Further questions from the body? Yes, sir, up here.
Hey everyone, Kevin Clusi, Precinct 2. I really trust Mr. Mpimba's opinion on this matter regarding turning this area into a residential area. However, for this project, whenever I run it past some of our constituents, they kind of are taken back by the fact that on 3 acres of land in between the high school and one of the busiest intersections in Burlington, that 82 units is going to be I guess being placed there. That's a whole lot different than, I guess, an individual house or a couple houses. And just the fact that it's going to increase the traffic there by about 50%, I think is very concerning. And I guess I'm struggling to see the benefit that this would have to existing Burlington residents, especially considering that most likely individuals from other surrounding areas are going to be the ones to move in here and occupy that space. And I also question why 10 years ago or so that area was removed from being a residential area. I question whether it's the best path forward, and I guess I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on that. Thank you.
Would you like to address that?
Sure. I mean, I wasn't here necessarily 10 years ago to address why you stopped. I know you had a sort of an upper limit, which was, I believe, 25% of the square footage of the buildings within that zone or that district that were eligible. And you were, I think you were around 21 or 22%, Joe, you may know. I think you were in that range. But I think you were getting more residential than you were bargaining for as compared to some of the other uses. So you sort of put a stop on it. You don't need to pick up the paper more than once to read. Housing's a huge crisis all over the place, whether it's affordable, middle, upper, whatever it is. There's housing that's needed every place. When you talk to the next applicant on theirs, they're going to be bringing a great project, more jobs. Where are people going to live? If you look online right now, there's probably 1 or 2 condos for sale in your town. I don't think there's one flat unit. I'm not even sure how many flat buildings there may be. When I say flat buildings, units that are not townhomes, units are stacked up. So there's a tremendous need for housing. I won't, debate. People have different opinions on number of units, and I respect your opinion in terms of that. I think from a traffic perspective, you can drive up and down most of the streets, and you'll see there's been a lot of residential in certain areas. I believe it was the Davis companies that just did one down at Corporate Place probably 2 years ago. If I may ask, Bob, do you know how many units that was? The one, 300? 300? So, that's right on Cambridge Street. It's 300 units. I bet most people don't even realize the traffic that's generated. Residential doesn't generate the traffic, especially at peak hours that others do, like retail. But we're going to, we can debate it now. We can debate it during the planning board and whatnot. The traffic here, as compared to what other uses can go there, is not going to be that significant. We've had Van Assen Associates, who's a major firm, take a look at it already. They believe that we're improving sight lines because that building's right up on the street. We're moving it back. We're closing one of the entranceways off. We're closing off other driveways. So we're making improvements to the traffic in the area. I'm not going to tell you we're not going to generate any traffic. That's just not right. But in comparison to other things, I think the traffic will be very much manageable. And I don't think you will notice it with the residential project on the street. I'm not saying there won't be any, but I don't think it'll be that impactful. I'm trying to think again, going back to why it was eliminated, Joe would have to address that. But I think it had a question that you were getting more than you weren't kind of keeping in lockstep. I mean, I can go into, having developed real estate for over 30, 35 years in Metro Boston, we own 50 buildings on Newbury Street. Currently we own 17. We used to own 50. I can go on and on about retail and why it should be where it is if you guys want to listen, but I just don't think that's the subject for tonight. But happy to debate where it should be. It should not be on this location, in my opinion. So we initially started off with some and we got rid of it because it was going to generate 200 to 250 more vehicle trips per day, even if by just putting in 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of retail. So we nixed that and said, I don't even know who's going to go there. So there's a lot that's gone into this project, et cetera. I respect, all of the comments. I think what you all need to consider is There's no mechanism right now for residential to be put anyplace else in your town center. There's nothing in your zoning bylaw that allows it. If you approve Article 35, you're creating a mechanism that would allow a developer to come back before this body and say, I'd like to put some resi on this site if it's in that zone, and you all will decide before it goes anywhere else, before it goes to the planning board, anybody else. So we've worked with staff, we've worked hard with Kristen Kasner and her team to come up with the right zoning bylaw mechanism that gives you all a maximum approval over what can happen on the next site. So don't think there's going to be this abundance of residential on every other site that's in here. Will some come forward? I'm sure some will, but it's going to be up to the body to say yes or no. And that's the way we've designed it. So I think that's good planning. I think your staff has done a great job in saying, let's put it back to the town meeting to decide if they want to consider opening residential back up. And if they do, this is the way to do it, but it's on a case-by-case basis. So as you go forward, you can decide. And you'll have an opinion on the next one like you do here, which I respect. And hopefully you'll get great developers to come in and do great design and, go from there. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Martin, online, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Precinct 7. A couple of points of clarification. The planning board voted 2-3-0 for Article 35 and 4-1-0 for 36. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what was the zoning board of zoning bylaw review committee's vote on each one of these? We got the amendment, but we didn't get a vote for.
That is their votes. That is their vote on this article 700.
Okay, I thought it was just on the amendment.
Well, the amended article is what they voted on. 700, please.
So the planning board voted actually against Article 35 and for 36. I'd like to have an explanation of that. And then my second point is it 15% of 82 units is 12.3 units. So it should be 13 units. You can't have a part of a unit be low income. So is it 13 units? Is it 12 units? Is it going to be 82 or 81 or 8? How many? A little bit more specific on the number of units and the actual number of low income.
I'm assured by town council. Planning board, do you wish to speak, or do you want Ms. Kastner to address this? Ms. Kastner, online, please.
I have one more question afterwards, sir.
To the question about the planning board vote.
Yes, the explanation of the planning board votes in favor of one and not in the other.
I certainly will, but I will leave obviously to the planning board members that are there if I do miss anything. But from the understanding that of the meeting was that there was a general consensus that the planning board did like the project, did think the project was appropriate for the site. There was a little bit of a back and forth as to the zoning mechanism and if we should look at it on a larger scale. And that started with, but trying to keep this simple. In terms of looking at more sites within the town center, we did look at this quite a bit, worked with the applicant to make the article itself and the zoning bylaw itself meet criteria that we're looking to work toward if we were going to be putting a multifamily zoning district in the town center. As many of you that may have listened to some of these meetings with some of the state requirements to bring additional housing zoning into our communities. We wanted to make sure that whatever this was, that this would comply with future zoning efforts as we move forward in the town center, as we move forward in areas, other commercial areas of town to consider multifamily. As I mentioned previously, to those boards in that discussion, the town center is a unique place. The town center overlay allows us to institute design review. And therefore, whatever we do in the town center is probably still going to be unique to the town center versus the rest of the town. In terms, back to the vote, I don't want to get too far afield, but back to the vote, there was, should we think about this more cohesive, more larger for the town center? Should we start here and then think about it larger for town center as we begin to look at some of the state requirements, which won't even be out until June, so it's hard to dovetail this into that, but we wanted to make sure what we did know would work. And it's really, and there was a question asked that if the planning department was going to put a list of properties in front of you for potential repositioning for multifamily housing, would this be on it? And we definitely would have this project on the list, as we believe that multifamily housing has a great buffer between single family homes and commercial districts. So that was my understanding of kind of that 2-3 vote on creating the district. Was it comprehensive enough? But if the district was passed, then more members liked this project in this district. And that was the difference between the 2-3 vote and the 4-1 vote. And again, Mr. Moderator, thank you. But I do, with 2 members in there, I want to make sure that they have the opportunity, or at least Member Mbta, as this kind of speaker of the board, has the opportunity if I did miss something.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kastner. Mr. Eiler.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. I had a follow-up question.
Excuse me, Mr. Martin. Yes, go ahead.
So if we do not pass these 2 articles, would Foxfield, how many waivers and variances would Foxfield have to apply for to make this project work within the existing overlay?
Ms. Kastner, can you answer that? Would this be allowed if this doesn't pass?
Is currently not in a permitted use within the overlay. So therefore, no variance will, we don't allow use variances in Burlington. So this project would not be possible without these amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Martin. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Eiler. Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Eiler, Precinct 6. The proponents talked for about 40 minutes, so it's going to take a few minutes to address some of those points. I think I have something unique relative to what's been talked about already. First off, I want to point out on both Article 35 and 36, while zoning articles generally require 2/3 votes, these only require majority votes due to Mass General Law having to do with multifamily. So you have to be very careful on your voting on this, because majority will carry a change on this. Certainly the developer has been very responsive, seems like a reasonable guy, and if what you want is a large multifamily high-density housing, and you think that's important to the town, and you're worried that a retail development will go in there shortly if we don't approve it, then this is a great thing to do. I don't happen to agree with either of those points, though, not surprisingly. So first off, realize that this is not low-cost housing. The developers estimated that they'll sell for $600 to $700K, so a little bit cheaper than a house, but not a lot. So this is not where your elderly parents move to save money to stay in town. This is not where workers are moving because they can't afford to live in town. These are fairly expensive condos, or fairly expensive housing. Ms. Kastner mentioned the Mbta Communities Law. Something to be aware of is that law has been passed, MGL 40A, Section 3A, that basically requires communities that are defined as Mbta communities, which Burlington is, will be required, or under threat of losing all kind of funding, will be required to have, in Burlington's case, at least 50 acres of multifamily housing zoning. And in addition, at least 25 of those acres have to be contiguous in order to count. And furthermore, individual parcel will only count if it's at least 5 acres under the current proposed regulations. This parcel is 3 acres. So just be aware that what's being proposed right now will in no way count towards the MBTA community requirement. So it will not help us there. Sure, additional rezoning can be done, and things can be connected together and so on, but as proposed, it does not cover that. An additional requirement is that the density has to be at least 15 units per acre in order to count. This development is 26.5 units per acre, so it's significantly denser than would be required by the MBTA Community Act. So why do I bring that up? My position is that Burlington is not an underdeveloped community in need of vastly more housing because we have all this empty space that we need to jam in houses for. I don't think our goal is to maximize. Everything okay? Very good. Okay. Remain calm. Nobody's hurt. So there's no need to jam in as many people as we can in Burlington, despite what the developers said. Yes, it would be nice to have more housing in general in Massachusetts. It doesn't have to all be in Burlington. We are one of the denser communities in the area. Let Lexington build some houses. I'm sure they have some room. Where's the motivation in this? At 6 to 700K per unit, this will gross the developer something like $50 million. So, we can see where the motivation is there, and I don't begrudge them that. I would go for it too if I were them. As I say, it's a nice-looking development. There's no argument there. I think that I've been to a few planning meetings because this is interesting to me. The biggest argument I've heard for this is that you can do retail development by right in this area, and if that's done, it'll be tragic because vast amounts of traffic and all these other issues that we don't want to have at that site. And it certainly would be worse from that point of view. But I think as we look around town, I think it's unlikely that if this doesn't go through right now, that someone's going to say, gee, there's not enough empty retail space in town. I think I need to build more right away. I don't see that happening. There's not a rush here. So we can take time to be thoughtful about this. The problem with the development for me is that it's putting the cart before the horse. We don't currently have, that I'm aware of, a plan of how much dense multifamily housing do we want in town? Do we have enough already? If we want to have more, or are being forced to have more zoning because of the MBTA Community Act, then we should think about that. We just voted for an additional planning board member. Great job for him. Let's come up with a plan for where would we like to have multifamily housing. It may not be in the town center. It may be, we have other developments in town that are multifamily that are not in the town center. Maybe we'll decide that putting a large condo complex, as we did earlier on 3A is not the smartest idea. Maybe we want to have somewhere else in town. That's something we should consider thoughtfully ahead of time, create a zoning district, and then if this happens to fit in that, great, let's do it. It doesn't have to be this dense. As I said, for the MBTA plan, if we decide we wanted to go with a minimum increase in housing, we could go as low as 15 units an acre, which is, again, substantially less than what this is doing. So we're being given a false choice of you're going to be stuck with retail if you don't vote for this, and this is a nice looking place, so you should get this instead. There's a third choice. We could decide to have multifamily housing that's half as dense as this. That would meet our needs. It may not be as profitable for a developer, and I completely wouldn't go for it if I were them. But you know what? There may be other developers that are happy at that density. They won't make as much, but they'll still make money.
Let's kind of wrap it up, Mr. Eiler.
Getting close to wrapping up.
Very close, please.
Again, they spoke for 40 minutes. It may take a couple.
You're not the proponent. I usually give 5 minutes. You're over that.
Trying to be fair. I'm wrapping up here. So I would say don't rush into this just because it happens to look nice. They're correct. It will be developed, but it doesn't have to be developed this way. And then a final point just on the taxes. Just be aware we're paying a little over $20,000 to educate each student. So with 7 students, you're eating up $140K of that tax increase already. So don't be enamored by the potential tax increase. Thank you for your indulgence.
Ms. Prendergast, way up the back.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michelle Prendergast, Precinct 5. I understand the comparison of retail versus residents in this location and the impact on traffic. I understand you're going to do a traffic study. My concern is not only for the people who are already on Cambridge Street and having people enter from this location, but from the point of view of these residents who are going to be buying these condominiums. I'm envisioning a line of traffic within the building area of people trying to pull out onto that street, especially during the rush hour of the morning. I go through there myself, and I can just imagine the pileup within the area. So I am not opposed to residents, but I do think it is a little bit densely planned on that note. Thank you.
Sir, would you like to address the access in and out quickly?
Again, there will be traffic. I wouldn't stand here and tell you there isn't going to be. The best thing for me to do is say pick out a 300-unit development in town, and there's probably a bunch of them, and go do a little recon and stand there or drive there. And it's very minimal in terms of the traffic coming in and out of them during peak hour. Let alone what's happened. COVID is very hard to predict some traffic patterns, but everything's changing. People are working from home. They're not leaving. If you're 55 and older, you might work 3 days a week. So we will do that full-blown traffic study. We do it on every project that we have. If there's other traffic coming, there's a good chance that we'll have right out only onto the site so that won't be taking a left, or I don't know if we could restrict it, no left turn during certain hours. That would be hard to police. I'm in favor of doing that if we want to restrict it that way, but I think it would be hard to police. But we may end up with a right out only, to get out of the site. I'm not really worried about people getting off the site. Respect your comment on it. But I think the traffic for 82 units is really not going to be that significant. And it's quoted in the traffic report we did, but it's a traffic report that glad to share. We've shared some of the results with the planning board, and we'll do a full study to see how else we could address other concerns in the area.
Online, Ms. Willard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard, Precinct 4, and a member of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. To a prior speaker's question, I was a member of town meeting when the moratorium was created. That was driven by the fact that there were no changes in the retail look in the civic center. So this is, as we now think of, the lower town center area. There were no businesses that were changed or updated, but there were simply some condominiums and some townhouses built. And that's why town meeting voted to do away with the residential portion. I have a question about the taxes. And this is, I don't need this right away, but is a condominium project like this considered residential or commercial? Two more points. One, 15% will be affordable, and that's affordable with a small a, and that's based on community standards. And there are rules and regs that set limits on the pricing of that. And finally, as I am in favor of this, I think that it's a much better option for us in that area than retail. And I think that if someone were to develop it as residential, single-family homes, that we would have maybe in 3 acres we could have 6 or 7 single-family homes, and they would all be mansions. And I think that's not living in the character of Burlington. Thank you.
Online, Mr. Cabe.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is Silvana Shakib, Precinct 6. I've been listening to all the comments, and especially from the meeting members from my Precinct 6. And I am definitely echoing everything that they have said, right from the constituents that are extremely worried about the traffic situation. It's the placement of where we're going to put this. It's right before the high school, which is already a nightmare in the mornings, so much so that most of us tend to avoid that Cambridge Street and cut through the main Vin Street if we don't really have to go there. That's one of the biggest concerns I think the constituents have. Second of all, we can't just have 2 options. It either has to be so many residential 82 units or it has to be retail. I think there has to be a hybrid model. I think the pandemic has kind of taught us everything, that there's a hybrid. That's what we are doing right now. And I'm sure we can think about something hybrid for this situation as well. So those are the key points I think we have to think about. The schools, as mentioned, the schools, the taxes will cover the students, that will increase. The firefighters that will be needing more, the police staff that we will have to employ, everything else that will go with the 82 units that come up. And even as mentioned, these are expensive. The folks that will come and live here are minimal 2 cars at least each unit. You're already looking at close to 200 cars right there going in and out. So please do the math, please do the calculation. I also have a concern with the wetlands. It was just mentioned that the wetlands are unattractive and they will be covered and made a garden, which the wetlands might be unattractive, but they are very integral and important to our ecosystems. And they house a lot of native species that are very critical. That is going to be completely replaced by grass, probably ornamental grass. I looked at it, there were ornamental grasses. There'll be trees and shrubs which are not native. And it's just going to kill the biodiversity that we need. So definitely, it's not a big thing in the grand scheme of things. People don't think about these things. But please, please think about the environment we are living in and what we are facing each day. Plus, not to mention the amount of chemicals and everything that's going to be sprayed in that area. So all in all, I just want our town meeting members as a body to really think through everything before they vote for this article. Of course, I'm not in favor. I'm absolutely not in favor. But we are responsible for the constituents. And before we put our own decisions on this or our own biases, I would just take a step back and think through what we are really voting for. And I'm sure we can come up with something better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Boyven.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Boyven, Precinct 1. I'm certainly happy to hear somebody talking about environmental impact of such a site. And it was also stated that there's no rush here. I'm going to start with that. I mean, other than the piano store and the small residence that's a part of this property, the piano store was an unfortunate failure. Believe me, I would like nothing better than this to have remained a piano store and a concert hall, but that is not going to happen. The remainder of the property, in my opinion, is primarily a dump. It looks terrible. It's an eyesore on town center, so I would like to see some urgency in getting it improved. I think this is a good use for the property. I like the fact that the design is set back with a terraced front. The other properties down the street near CVS are just an eyesore themselves. They're a towering thing right in your face. I am pleased to see the wetland garden being protected and used as a feature on this property. It's going to be the feature garden as part of the front of the building. Most people look at wetlands and think that they're a wasteland. That is not the case at all, and a healthy wetland can be a beautiful thing, and I think this would perhaps be an opportunity to highlight such a thing. Environmentally, I would like to hear you comment on the energy usage that's going to be done in this building with fossil fuel usage, the availability of flat roof I saw there, although you mentioned it might become a green terrace. It's not clear to me if solar would be feasible. Are you going to have electric charging stations for cars? You know, a thing that would be, as I call it, designing for the 21st century. So I would appreciate your comments on that. Thank you.
I think after the meeting the other day, we're doing a lot with LEED on all of our projects. It's the way everything is going. We will be LEED certified. Which level, I don't know exactly yet. The units will all be heated and cooled with electric units, so there won't be gas to the units themselves. Their technology is changing real quick to make these buildings 100% electric. They're not quite there yet because some of the larger spaces still require some gas boiler type areas to be heated for the larger ones. I suspect that by the time we get to build this in 1.5 to 2 years, that will not be the case, and that will be 100% electric. The units themselves will be 100% electric. There's some discussion, and I've even engaged with a few of you. Do you want gas ranges or convection ranges? Because that's the next place. If you like to cook with gas, it might be going by the wayside because it just may not be offered with us or anybody else. So I think we're going to achieve a very high standard of LEED through that particularly. The construction techniques are so much better now in terms of energy efficiency in the buildings, the windows, all that stuff. As far as solar, we definitely will have charging stations. I would envision we will have a number of charging stations put in when we build it, and we will have the capability to convert probably every space to electric over time. That's where it's going. We know that. So that's likely what will happen over time. The roof is not that big of an area that I don't know if we'll have solar on it. If the technology is good enough that we can generate some solar on a relatively small area, then we would definitely consider doing it. We're going to need some areas for condensers and things like that for mechanicals. But we will be studying all of that. Cube 3 does a ton of it. We do it on all of our other projects where we are very much into sustainability, resiliency, all that. We did, I did a lot of permitting Assembly Row, and I think we ended up at LEED Platinum, I want to say, we just did 1.4 million square feet of lab space. And I think we ended up somewhere between gold and platinum, which was a very difficult standard to hit for lab. So it's something that we're going to continue, we will continue to look at. The only other, if I could just, from a wetland standpoint, totally respect, I forget your name, Miss, but on the wetlands, that every wetland is sensitive. These are there is some contamination on the site. It is where the wetlands are. I think we're going to make things a heck of a lot better. From a productivity standpoint, it is going to act as drainage for the site. So the species will hopefully grow, which is not necessarily the case. There are some species that are growing now, but we will definitely be enhancing, you know, that entire area. And I'd just like to, I don't know about correct one thing. I think it was Ms. Willard that talked about affordability with a small a. I'm not exactly sure why she's making that distinction. These will be affordable units in perpetuity. So there'll be, let's say 13, which is the percentage based on the 82. Those units will be deed restricted. They will sell for whatever the state allows. 2-bedroom is probably in the low 200s in perpetuity. So I'm not sure why that would be a small a. To me, that's a large a for affordability, just to clarify that point. And if I'm missing her point, then glad to discuss it.
Thank you. Online, Ms. Warren.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. Chris Warren, Precinct 4. I have mixed feelings on this. I think my biggest concern is something that Mr. Eiler brought up, was that we don't know what the rules are going to be for the state in terms of having MBTA, you know, qualifying. Right now, I believe we have 33% multifamily housing, but a lot of it's not lined up with the bus routes. And our one bus route that was dedicated to Burlington has been suspended for 2 years. So a lot of people have to drive to other towns now to pick up a bus because they're really long rides, the ones that are shared with other towns. But I guess I would like to find out what exactly, where the town is going to, where the state's going to come out on this. And then if we know what it is, and if it is really a minimum of 5 acres or whatever, I mean, I would be interested in this kind of a project if it helped us to meet what we need to meet the state mandate. But from what Mr. Eiler said, it will not, because it's less than the minimum acreage. And so, you know, I would like to get a sense of when we will have more of an idea of when these state regulations are going to become effective or finalized. Thank you.
Ms. Kastner, can you answer any of that question about the MBTA regulations?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the draft guidelines came out at the end of last year. The comment period was through March 31st, 2022. On those draft guidelines, they anticipate having those guidelines come out in June. However, the guidelines are based on what Mr. Eiler had mentioned, was the amendment to 40A section 3A, which in law right now, this section requires that housing be at least multifamily housing, at least 15 units an acre, family friendly, meaning that not age restricted, and has units that a family, you know, not all just 1-bedroom apartments, and requires it to be near transit and or kind of town center locations. The things that were in the regulations that Mr. Eiler mentioned, the 3 acres, 25 acres, 50 acres, there's a lot of communities. There was hundreds of communities that commented on these regulations, as well as individuals. We have, you know, just in the planning community, been having conversations of, you know, where is this going to shake out? What we know are the 3 things I said are in the statute. None of that is going to change. In terms of housing production, in a lot of small towns, especially in downtowns, we're not unique, that there's a lot of these smaller parcels. If we can be building housing in downtowns, why are we limiting it to a 5-acre minimum? So we feel, just in the planning, that where the conversation is going is some of those more rigid minimums are going to be a little bit more flexible. So in terms of this site, 3.5 acres versus 5 acres, that point, I'm not as worried about if we want to start this process to have something count under that criteria as it comes out. if you're comfortable with this project, I think that project will. We worked, oh, sorry. And the other piece in the statute was that it has to be by right, not by special permit. And therefore we worked with the applicant to make sure that the language in this amendment is in line with the statutory requirements of the amendment that has passed the legislature, but we are awaiting the guidelines. So there are key criteria that this would fall under and pass, and we, awaiting that criteria. So, but I feel comfortable that the 3.5 versus 5 acre piece is definitely one of the hot topics of conversation as to, if we're meeting the goal of building housing, why the minimum acreage? So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gassner. Online, Mr. Stacci, and then I'll get to you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joanne Frustacci, Precinct 3. I just want to say, I think it's logistically very problematic that we are taking these two articles together. In fact, we have had some reference to the zoning change, but by and large, this conversation has been about the project itself. I would have preferred that we, as a deliberative body, thought out whether we want to make the zoning change, period. There was a split decision by the planning board, and that majority who voted against the zoning bylaw was thinking in terms of a more comprehensive plan. And I think that Mr. Cormier's reference to promises made many years ago about what Cambridge Street would look like versus what it does look like really says a lot about the fact that we as a town leadership should be deciding what we want separate and apart from what this developer is proposing. As kind and good to work with as he sounds like, this is a very dense housing development. I also want to ask, it seems that the picture depicts townhomes, the illustration, but you're really talking about like kind of a building, am I correct? One large building.
It's a what we call a flat type building in the industry. So there'll be basically 3 stories, and each of those stories will connected by elevator, but there'll be no real stairs in the units themselves. There's a possibility that you could build inside the gable ends, and you might end up with a second story loft or something on it, but we haven't really got designed that far. That wouldn't change the number of units or anything like that. But the rest of the building is just all single story.
Is townhomes, and that's not exactly what this is. Am I correct?
Looking at the front wings of the building, that are 2 claws kind of that stick out. They're 64 feet wide. There's units on one side and on the other side, but they're flat units, so they're not. It's not a townhouse design.
And I do with development. And if you estimate that there are 7 children per 100, maybe that's based on something. However, that's not been the experience in the units that have been built over by Wegmans. There are far more children than that ratio that you proposed. So in fact, especially if 13 of these units are going to be affordable, could be many families who want to live in a suburban school district that is well funded. And I would guess that there will be many more families who will, given there's no housing stock in Burlington, who will buy in this development. So I'm going to say I'm going to be opposed to the zoning it in itself. And I hope that we can coalesce on that and rethink how we want development to look in the town center, and then come back to your project at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frustacci. Mr. DiTucci.
Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. I've had a business in town for the last 40 years on 3A as well as the Middlesex Turnpike. The majority of the traffic that we have in town is commuter traffic, people going back and forth, not necessarily from condominiums or apartments or anything like that. Keep in mind that these are not apartments. If these were apartments, I would not support it. I support this because they are condominiums, they are ownership. Those people that are moving in are not transits. They're going to be having to do with our community the same thing that everybody else that buys a home, even for $1.5 million. They could be future elected officials in the time. I like the idea about young families for $700,000 for a young couple in the town of Burlington. It's not a big deal in this town. That's all there is to it. People can afford, they want to come here because of what the town has to offer, because of the schools and the recreation. People that do sell homes that decide they want to get into something like a garden style condominiums are going to be very favorable to have these. And I just think that it's fabulous to have this at that site. And again, I'm not saying that this could go on another site someplace else. Maybe someplace else we need townhouses as opposed to garden-style condominiums. But I've been on this site now 2 or 3 times. I listened to all the meetings. Just focusing on just what we have tonight, the presentation for this particular site, this is a great use, and I support it 100%.
Thank you, Mr. Tucci. Ms. Saltman. Oh, yeah. I will get to Mr. Davison. Do you have something to say, Ms. Saltman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Myrna Saltman, Precinct 2. I have 3 questions. Am I allowed to ask 3 different questions?
Yes, you're allowed, Myrna.
Okay. The first question is, the developer has been before the planning board many, many times, as I heard you say, and I'm concerned why the planning board's vote is only 2 to 3 when there are 7 members on the planning board. So is there any explanation for the other 2 members not voting?
It's a question to the board. Go ahead, Mr. Gaffney.
Thank you. There was an absence due to one person not being able to attend due to multiple absences, and then there was, I think, an election that we had a planning board member leave.
Okay, thank you for question 1. Question 2, environmentally, there are more electric cars that are about, and the possibility of 164 vehicles being in this site. Will there be electric car chargers in the garage that you're offering?
Yes.
Okay. And my last question, I presume that you presented a traffic study to the planning board about the impact. Does the town do its own traffic study from any of our departments, whether they concur with the developer or whatever time of day or month that we do a traffic study? Do we ever do our own traffic studies?
Mr. Gaffney.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, the planning department and planning board does, depending on the project, have a peer review traffic study. That can happen. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Mr. Morey. Then I'll get to you, Mr. Davison. I'm not ignoring you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bruce Morey, Precinct 1. Question to the proponent. One question and a couple of comments. Do you have an idea of the breakdown of the 82 units, 1, 2, 3 bedroom? Do you have any idea at this point, or is it that's more to be determined?
2/3, 2 bedrooms, 1/3, 1 is a rough approximation.
Okay.
So call it, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So whatever that math works out, it's probably 45 to 20 something.
Okay,
2 to 1.
That's helpful, thank you. As multiple members of this body have commented, and you as well, traffic is the big issue. The determining factor for me in voting and supporting the building 19.5 redo was the light being put in there. I don't know if there's an option to put a light at this facility, or maybe you mentioned right turn only. I would wholeheartedly support that as a potential solution to this traffic. I think the architecture is impressive. I've seen multiple meetings, and the current state of the property is truly in disrepair. I think any option is a better option than what we have there now. I'm a supporter of this particular project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morey. Mr. Davison. I told you I wouldn't forget you.
I'm afraid I'm being punished for sitting next to Mr. Harlan.
That could be its own punishment.
Doug Davison, Precinct 2. I'm not in favor of this, and I'll try not to be repetitive. I'm concerned that we're not working from a bigger plan, and I don't believe that if a developer hadn't come forward, I don't think we'd be looking at the zoning request from the planning department or the planning board to say, hey, we have a problem here, and this we need to solve it. Here is a proposed solution. Had we just gotten Article 35 that set out this larger potential thing, and then we opened it up and said, hey, developers, you can come select some sites and bring them to us and say this is why this is a better site, I'd feel much more comfortable. But I'm afraid we're going the other way. The MBTA was mentioned. I'll be brief, but as far as everything I've seen and heard, I believe that we are going to be required to create some more multifamily housing zoning, and it's likely going to have to be in a large area, and so I think we're going to just need to address that. This may then become part of it. It may be that 3.5 acres is okay, but it may not, and I don't know how many multifamily units we want. And then finally, with the overlay, well, it's interesting. I think in the last 20 years, we've had a walkable downtown develop more organically, and not just organically, with the planning board. They've done a phenomenal job with the district, Middlesex Turnpike, 3rd Ave, and now starting to join those things together. That's a real walkable downtown that just needs some multifamily housing to then be mixed use. And what the dream is, it's just about a mile away from what we're trying to develop here. What I don't see is us developing another retail infrastructure section of town when we have a section that has developed very nicely organically, because those retail spaces are serving another 100,000 people that come to Burlington every day, as opposed to our small village feeling of 25,000 people who live in town. So I just think that we should defeat this. It doesn't mean that next week somebody's going to come in and build some giant retail space by right. I think that in the next however many months, as we look at MBTA, we can come back and say this is or isn't a good spot, and this is how we're going to solve the bigger problem.
Ms. Nash online.
Mildred Nash, Precinct 3. 2 quick comments. There was a large Globe article just a couple of weeks ago which made me think very, very long and hard about the Article 35. Woburn had just built a huge housing development, and it turns out that it did not meet the MBTA regs, and it looked as if that might be not able to be used. I think that if we remember back to what Mr. Cormier was talking about what can go wrong, will go wrong, I think that this may be the wrong time to vote in what is in Article 35, because we may be caught the way Woburn was. My second comment has to do with the right turn only solution. I walk by the daycare center that's very close to that, and I see it totally disregarded over and over and over again. We don't have the ability to regulate that, and it is ignored, and it becomes even more serious when it's closer to the center of town. So I think that we would do well to vote no on Article 35. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell.
Chris Campbell, Precinct 1. I think my main question is the parking. So looking at this, if I've counted correctly, there's roughly 135 spaces here. And depending on the amount of people, anywhere from 164 cars to You do your math, the 2/3, 1/3 could be 137. That doesn't include visitor parking. So I think besides the traffic, my question is about the parking.
Go ahead, sir.
I think we've got it designed right now, one for every bedroom, and then we added on about another 10 or somewhere in that range for visitor and whatnot to get us to somewhere 140, plus or minus. I think that's how the math works. I think shown on that plan, 140. It's all right. I think there's 140 on that plan. So depending on what we did for the actual, one per bedroom is what we did, and so forth. So I think if that answers your question. I'll point out one thing too on the traffic. Again, I'm not going to tell you there's no traffic. So when I developed Arbor Point, does everybody know where Arbor Point is? It's the old Burlington Sand and Gravel. Everybody knows where that is, I assume. It used to be owned by the Shelsey family. So I designed that when I was at National. I'd encourage everybody to go over and look at it. The wetlands are beautiful. It's probably 40 acres of land. 495 units, I think, was approved on that site and built. I would challenge everybody, go stand at the intersection of Wheeler and Middlesex Turnpike on your average Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. And then go on that same street during Christmas season and tell me what's hard to travel around. And that's your impact between residential and retail. Because you can't drive on Middlesex Turnpike. I'm from Woburn, I avoid it during that time. I'm sure you guys all do as well. Again, the traffic, there will be some traffic. I don't think 82 units is going to make a dramatic impact. And it's on not only the right-hand turnout, that's not a solution, that's part of one thing we will do. So, but we'll have a full-blown traffic study. But leave that image in your mind of 495 units coming out of Arbor Point on your average day, and then try and go over there during the holiday season. And that's where your traffic comes from.
Mr. Wadilla.
Thank you very much, Dave Wadilla, Precinct 1. The fact that we're discussing these articles together is telling. We're not proactively deciding what we want to do, but rather sort of opportunistically reacting to this, okay? I would urge us to sort of address our bylaws separate, okay? We need to think about what we want for family housing in the overlay district before we just jump into a project in this space. So I would urge you to vote down Article 35, okay? I don't actually have a problem with the project, but as Mr. Davidson or Mr. Eiler pointed out, right, we may not need density at this level. We may not want density at this level. We might want to think of something different for housing within the overlay that's organic to us, it's defined by us, it's defined without the pressure of a project on top of us, and come forward with that for housing within the overlay, rather than, hey, we've got a project, let's jump on it, okay? That's all I'm saying. I would urge you to vote down Article 35. I understand the implications on this project, but I don't think that we're thinking about this the right way. I don't think we're actually planning. I think we're reacting. I would urge the planning board to plan here and sort of take a consensus of what the town would like to see for housing in this zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wadilla. Ms. Kastner, do you have any comment relative to that?
I don't have a specific comment. I mean, we certainly are mandated under the MBTAs to do a lot of housing visioning over the next year before 2023. So that's something that, we will be doing. And thankfully with this body, we have additional capacity to try to do more of that. I don't have any other comments. I'm not sure if the planning board members would as well. I mean, as I mentioned before, the goal of the town center housing initially in 2005 was to put housing in the town center in those areas between the core commercial districts and the single family homes. So, thank you.
Mr. Wadilla.
I'd like to point out that the silence from the planning board is deafening at this point, okay? I'm not addressing Ms. Kastner.
I only allow one appoint one person representing a board or a committee to speak. At this point, it's Ms. Kastner. That is why the planning board is quiet.
Mr. Moderator, point on the zoning.
Go ahead.
So the zoning was actually, we came up with it after many meetings with planning staff. We didn't just throw it out there and say this is what we should do. It's actually a very well thought through piece of zoning legislation that is extremely flexible. And it puts all the emphasis back to you all to decide whether you like it. So it's a tool that you can use going forward for my project or any other project. And if you want, like my project, to comply with the MBTA thing, rezone something next to me at your next town meeting and you have 82 units in. It's that flexible that with Kristen's help, Melissa's help, we've done it and written this so that it can comply with the MBTA thing. Should that be something you want to do, it doesn't really matter to me, but it's an extremely well-drafted, flexible, to your town meeting's benefit, not the developers. I mean, if I was a developer, I'd put this thing in as of right and say, hey, great, we can develop this. It has so many belt and suspenders checkpoints on it so that this is good planning, this is good zoning for going forward. Are there other ways that you're going to look at the MBTA thing going forward? Absolutely. And Kristen has a hard job in her hand over the next 9 to 12 months to figure out what other sites and how are we going to do it. And I'm not saying it's not going to be challenging. I am a zoning and permitting attorney myself, so I know the challenges that are there. This is a good piece of zoning for your flexibility later on. Whether you like my project or you don't, you can decide the next project whether you like theirs. So.
Ms. Kastner, would you have any comments or relative to just the zoning article to Article 35? Maybe give us a quick overview of what it is. I chose to have us discuss these together because they are inextricably linked. So, but I note the questions relative to Article 35. So if you could make some comments relative to that, please.
Be happy to. So just quickly back in time. So in 2005, we passed a town center overlay district. That town center overlay district also created and clarified the multifamily housing, which multifamily housing in Burlington is 4 units or more. We also allowed for 2 and 3 family housing at the same time, as well as bed and breakfast and other things. But anyway, multifamily housing for 4 units plus. At the time in the town center, we allowed for multifamily to be by right with site plan review and design review in the town center. A few years, I think 2000, say 10 or 12, then the town meeting body proposed, or there was a petition to roll that back. Initially, that housing, there was a cap of all the square footage within the town center. Only 25% could be housing. At the time, it was the housing bubble. We didn't want it to, take over housing. There was a housing cap, 25%. I do agree that we probably built out to about 22%. Anyway, multifamily housing is not allowed. But the origins of this article looked back at what we had done before, as well as add some new items. The first conversation was, do we just bring back housing? And there was a little bit of a feeling of, if we bring, and this is the iterative process between the applicant and the staff as well as the board, it came in, okay, well, what if we put this overlay within the central business district, which is only part of the town center that was discussed in that peach color, and therefore put a district in that each parcel would then have to come back to the town meeting body to be rezoned. So when you're looking at this proposal, this is a proposal to have an overlay district over the town center central business district. So it's a town center multifamily district, which is another overlay. Allow for that use, the multifamily use, 4 units or more, in that district. That started out as a special permit use based on the legislation of the MBTA communities that is actual legislation at this point. We urged the applicant to consider more of a by right use to be more in line. So if so this project would count, as well as obviously it would need to go with the design regulations of the town center and site plan review. And then anyway, so as to get back on topic. So it is use regulations allowing that multifamily use only in this district as the amendment you anyway, I'm not going to talk about that yet. The district boundaries includes, as I mentioned, just the Peach area, the and then the last section is a multifamily housing dimensional waiver, which was discussed to look at a number of different measures to really allow for flexibility within the site design. So that's the final piece that's kind of more of the new piece. But overall, just as mentioned, it's a new district. Each site would need to be rezoned into this new district. And what you have in front of you is a by right multifamily allowed use in a town center multifamily overlay district. And that's Article 35. Article 36 is asking to rezone 135 Cambridge Street and adjacent properties into this new town center multifamily district. And any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Now, are there any questions directly relative to Article 35 on the zoning? Not on the project, but on the zoning. I see hands that were up, that are still up, but I want to focus on just the zoning for the moment. Mr. Riggs.
Not yet? Test. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I don't think my question's relevant. Sorry, Roger Riggs, Precinct 3. Is this spot zoning? It seems like there's an overlay, there's a zone. Sorry, this is about 36. You asked about 35. Anyway, why isn't this spot zoning? But you can ask it later.
All right.
Sorry.
Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. A question in regards to the housing. I know the original overlay was, we kind of spoke extensively about a 25% housing component to that, and purposely because we didn't want too much housing or too much commercial. If I'm reading this correct, if someone could possibly answer this, if not, get an answer. If we're now rezoning and taking kind of the spot zoning approach to the original overlay, is that, to my interpretation, is now taking that away from that original overlay? Because we originally had done some rough calculations on the square footage areas and what could potentially go in as commercial, and that drove how much housing stock would basically be there. So if I'm reading this correctly, if we take that out, that no longer is part of the original overlay. So that does change some of that calculation, correct?
Ms. Kastner, can you explain whether this changes the underlying requirements of the overlay district, or does it just apply to where this zoning may be voted in?
With the I guess it's kind of referred to as the moratorium, even though that's not exactly what it was, because it was the the proposal to roll back multifamily the proposal took the entire section out. So that section was taken out when multifamily housing was rolled back in the town center. So there is no 25% cap. There is no building permit cap, and there hasn't been since the original passage of the overlay. This does not, so therefore this does not have anything to do with the 25% cap. It doesn't exist anymore. And the way this is drafted, each and every parcel would have to be rezoned by this body and to get into this development. So I guess instead of having a cap in the zoning, it's really every time someone wants to do a project, they need to come back to this body to do that. So it doesn't affect the 25% cap because it doesn't exist in the zoning since I think 2012.
Who's that? Mr. Monaco.
Hello? It's Frank Monaco, Precinct 4. It was stated that these two articles only required a majority vote. Just this Article 35, which is a zoning article, is that correct that we can pass this zoning with a majority vote?
Yes, that is correct. Due to a change in the state law aimed at multifamily housing relative to the MBTA.
That's dangerous.
Talk to the governor. Ms. Highland, you have a question on the zoning. Ms. Highland, you're muted, and please turn on your camera, please.
I don't know how to unmute myself. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Mimi.
I'm sorry. I'm driving. I've been driving from Ohio, and I'm on the freeway. I cannot. I'm having trouble negotiating all the buttons. And it's not safe for me to try further. I'm going to pass at this time about on the zoning bylaw. I do hope to be able to raise my hand again for the project. Thank you.
Questions on the zoning? Mr. DeBona. Mr. DeBona. All those in favor of moving the question? This is a 2/3 vote. All those opposed? Thank you. There being approximately 8 people opposed, there's clearly a 2/3 majority to move the question. So now we will vote on the amended Article 35. Do you have a poll ready? Okay. All those in favor of Article 35? Actually, I'm going to ask you to stand, please, so I can get a better read on the... All those opposed? Yeah, we're going to need a read on this. We're going to need a couple counters. Our financial wizards can handle the counting, please. Thank you. So let's go back to all those in favor, please. Please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please rise. (23) 23. I got 46. 14, 9, 23 in favor. 14, 11, 23 opposed. There being 46 in favor and 48 opposed, the motion fails. I need 7 people to stand if they want a roll call. One, two, three, 4. I don't have enough. We have a call for a roll call. Anybody on left? All right, we got 7 people. Let's have a roll call.
John? Okay, we're going to do a roll call. I'm going to remind you again about the right way to do this, especially with hybrid. Your name will be called. Please say the full name so we don't have any. Thank you. He will say the full name. You will stand up if you're in-house. You will say your name and you will say your precinct. Actually, you don't need to say precinct because he's going to call them in order. You will say your name, and then you will give your vote, okay? You will wait until the mic comes to you, okay? If you are on the WebEx, you'll need to pause for a moment. He will turn the WebEx up. You will give your name, and then you will give your vote. If you don't do it that way, we have a problem. So we've got to go through this very methodically. Okay? I know, Frank, you're old, but we'll try to get it done for you. You got a point of order or question?
Is there a question out there? Yes, ma'am.
Mike?
I'm Michelle Papagno, Precinct 2. So my question is, if somebody misses their turn to vote when you go through, will they get another chance to vote at the end because they missed it? That happened the other night.
Yes, they will.
They will? Okay.
I won't rob them of their right to vote just because they're not paying attention. Excuse me? Please use a microphone. I can't hear you.
So I can step out to use the ladies' room, and if I missed my vote, I can vote again?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Go now. The other question, let me just, because I want the kids with the mics to be moving. If I can just make that.
No, I'm not going to make them wait for the mic.
Okay, you're not going to make them wait?
No,
Then you've got to repeat.
I will repeat it.
Okay.
But for them,
Okay. Say I got carried away with the mics. I love mics.
Yeah, that's right.
I like the little dots.
all right, for those who are here in person, we're not going to have you wait for a mic. Please stand, give your name, and yell so I hear it, and I will repeat it so the people online know what the vote is. Okay? Now, we will start with Precinct 1. Mimi Bix Highland, online.
Mimi Bix Highland, against.
Thank you. William Boyven. That's a yes, Mr. Boyven. Online, Bradford Bond.
Bradford Bond, against.
In person, Mr. Christopher Campbell. That's a no. Nolan Glantz. Michael Hardy. Amanda Leskowski.
Amanda Leskowski, yes.
Bruce Morey. That's a yes. That's a yes. Gregory Ryan.
Gregory Ryan, Precinct 1, yes.
Maureen Ryan.
Ryan, no.
Mark Zaya.
Mark Zaya, yes.
Adam Sinesi. That's a no from Mr. Sinesi. Jayashri Varaganti.
Jayashri Varaganti, Precinct 1, yes.
Thank you. Dina Wasaf.
Dina Wasaf, no.
David Wadilla.
David Wadilla, no.
That's a no. Precinct 2. Jorge Andrade.
Andrade, no.
Catherine Beyer. That was a yes. Kevin Colucci. That was a no. Doug Davison. That's a no. Angela Hannafin. That was a no. Daniel Hannafin. That's a no. Kristen Murphy Currier.
Kristen Murphy Currier, no.
Patricia O'Brien.
Patricia O'Brien, yes.
Eleanor O'Connell. That was a no. Michelle Papano. That was a no. John Ryan. John Ryan? We'll come back to him. Myrna Saltman. That was a yes. Kimberly Trainer,
Kimberly Trainer, no.
Laura Vittum,
Yes. Laura Vittum, yes.
yes. Precinct 3, Sean Connors,
Cynthia Phillips.
what was that? What was that?
Forgot Cynthia Phillips, Precinct 2.
Excuse me, who is this? I'm sorry.
Cynthia Phillips by phone.
Okay, so you weren't marked in. All right. Vote yes or no.
That would be a no.
Thank you. All right. Precinct 3, Sean Connors. All right, we'll come back. Lucy Damiani. Lucy? Are you muted?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeffrey DeBona. That was a no. Sherry Ellis. That's a yes. Joanne Fristacci.
Joanne Fristacci, no.
Steve Moran. That was a no. Mildred Nash. Mrs. Nash?
No. No.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Paul Noonan.
Paul Noonan, yes.
Brian Pupa. That was a no. Daniel Rasky. That was a yes. Roger Riggs. That was a no. Fadine Saterial. That was a yes. Precinct 4, Nancy Bonacera.
Nancy Bonacera, yes.
Karen Cooper. That was a no. Reed Cooper, oh, no, he's not here. Ryan DaCosta. Ryan DaCosta. I'm not here. All right, moving on. Mark Gerbrands.
Precinct 4, no.
That was a no. Brian Harriman.
Brian Harriman, yes.
Tamara Maniscalco.
Maniscalco, yes.
David Miller.
David Miller, yes.
Frank Monaco. That was a no. Megan Nowojcik. That's a no. Laura Nichols.
Laura Nichols, no.
Michael Prue. That was a no. Eileen Sickler. That's a yes. Christine Warren.
Christine Warren, Precinct 4, no.
Sally Willard. Chiffon Wong.
Chiffon Wong, Precinct 4, yes.
Precinct 5. Robert Bunker. Mr. Bunker? I don't hear you. We're moving on. Craig Callahan.
No.
No. Christine Concession.
Christine Concession, no.
Christine Concession, no. Mark Donahue.
Mark Donahue, yes.
Donahue, yes. Aaron Ellis. Aaron?
No.
That was Aaron Ellis, no. Phyllis Neufeld.
Phyllis Neufeld, no.
Bonnie Nichols.
Bonnie Nichols, no.
Bonnie Nichols, no. Frank O'Brien.
Frank O'Brien, no.
Frank O'Brien, no. Michelle Prendergast. Michelle Prendergast, no. David Tate.
David Tate, no.
David Tate, no. Frank Orsino. Frank Orsino is a no. Z Wang.
Z Wang, yes.
Z Wang, yes. Richard Wing. Richard Wing, no. Ernest Zabolotny.
Ernest Zabolotny, no.
That was a no. Precinct 6. Roger Bell. That was Roger Bell, yes. Daniel Collins. Daniel Collins, yes. John Cormier. John Cormier, no. Daniel R. DiTucci. DiTucci, yes. Elizabeth DiTucci. Elizabeth DiTucci, no. Mara DiTucci. Mara? No vote. Daniel DiTucci Jr.
Daniel Artucci Jr., yes.
James Fraxick.
James Frazick, yes.
John Eiler. That was a no, John Eiler. Darrell Interests.
Daryl Interest, no.
Darrell Interests, no. Gary Caskey. Gary Caskey, yes. Ed Parsons. Ed Parsons, yes. James Round. James Round, yes. Sylvana Shakabe.
Silvana Shakib, no.
Yeah. Sylvana Shakabe, no. Nicole Sprinkle Cadillac.
Yes.
That was a yes. William Trilligan.
William Trelligan, yes.
William Trilligan, yes. Precinct 7. Elliot Brown. Elliot Brown, no. Adrian Callahan.
Callahan, no.
Callahan, no. Sarah Cowley.
Sarah Colley, yes.
Sarah Cowley, yes. Julie Cullen. Julie Cullen, yes. Betsy Hughes. Betsy Hughes, yes. Cynthia Kazan. How do you pronounce that? Give me. Kazanjian. Okay. All right. Cynthia Kazanjian, yes. I'll practice that name, Cynthia. John Kelly.
John or Jack Kelly, no.
Kelly, no. Scott Martin.
Scott Martin, Precinct 7, yes.
Scott Martin, yes. Ryan McSheffrey. Jonathan Sachs. Jonathan Sachs, no. Anthony Salamone.
Anthony Salamone, yes.
Anthony Salamone, yes. Paul Schwartzman. Paul Schwartzman abstains. Lois Smith Martin.
Lois Smith Martin, yes.
Lois Smith Martin, yes. David Van Camp. David Van Camp, no. David Webb. David Webb is yes. Mark Woods.
Mark Woods, no.
Woods, no. Is there anybody we missed? Okay, Jennifer Goldsmith. Yes, go ahead.
I voted yes.
Yes. 7. She wasn't checked off. Anybody else we missed? Mr. Bunker.
Earlier? Just checking.
You're in what precinct? No, we did not.
No.
What is your vote?
Vote no.
Robert Bunker is a no. Anybody else?
Precinct 1.
Go ahead,
Lori
Lori.
Glantz, Precinct 1, yes.
Lori, you have to.
Lori Glantz is a yes. Anybody else? Okay, let's do some math. 19, 25, 32, 44, 55. 45, 55?
And one's tipsy.
There being 45 in favor, 55 opposed, the article fails. Right. So as the district failed, 36 is moot.
Somebody should withdraw it or they should vote it down, but
Do we have to vote on it?
somebody needs to do something. Like, you can't just say it's moot, right? This is an article here, so why don't you ask the proponents to withdraw it?
Okay, for Article 36, as there is no zoning that can apply to it, we either need it to be withdrawn or we need to vote it down. There's one motion made to withdraw it, and there is a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of withdrawing the article? Opposed?
I know, ditto. Let's see if the planning board has a recommendation on Article 37.
What an embarrassment. No. No sense being efficient. Mr. Kelly, you have a question for us? Kelly, go ahead.
Are you telling me to go ahead, Mr. Moderator?
Yeah, Jack, you said go ahead.
Jack,
Unmuted,
unmute,
Jack.
please.
You have to unmute, Jack.
Okay. Point of information, and maybe council can tell us, is there a difference if it is voted negative as far as how soon something can come back? And what might we want to give people the option of voting it down and giving it a negative vote? So could that difference be explained to the body?
There's already a motion to withdraw on the floor.
Point of information may help them determine what they want to do with this motion.
We're already in the middle of the vote, Jack. The people here in person have already voted. There being a clear majority in favor of withdrawing the article is hereby withdrawn. No, I'm ignoring that. We have 3 more articles to go. We have 2, excuse me. We have 37 and 38 to do. Oh, and 39. So we got 3 to do. Let's get it going. Let's get her done. Ms. Shakabe, you have a question for us.
I apologize.
Okay, Article 37, Planning Board. Is there a vote and a recommendation? Point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Stacci.
Can you get a ruling from council as to the procedure stipulated in Robert's Rules of Order when a town meeting member calls the question and is seconded? Is it, as you stated on May 11th, debatable, requiring an immediate vote? Or is it, as you stated to me, May 16th, that it is your decision and at your discretion?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay. Can you ask council the procedure that is stipulated in Robert's Rules of Order? If a town meeting member calls the question and is seconded, is the procedure non-debatable, requiring an immediate vote? Or is it, as you stated, at your discretion? We've done it 2 different ways and 2 different nights.
I have the discretion. I have discretion on moving the question, Joanne. That is completely that is within my ability to decide. We have typically, when its question has been moved, we have just gone with it. However, your moderator has learned a few things along the way, and one of them is that if it is in the moderator's judgment that there is significant discussion left to be held, that, or if someone is using that as a procedure to stop or prevent discussion, it is within my jurisdiction or to ignore it and move on. As far as a motion to adjourn, I probably shouldn't ignore it, but if you really want to spend the time to vote on it, we could do that.
You're talking about calling the question, and I'm wondering if council can weigh in on that.
With town council? Calling the question, is it?
No, I'm not, it's your discretion. I'm not going to weigh in on it right now. It's not relevant. We're in the middle of taking votes.
Town council says it's irrelevant at this point, so we're going to keep on moving with what we've got, Joanne. We can discuss this at a later date, should you wish to. Article 37, Planning Board recommendation. Do you wish to speak, or do you wish Ms. Kastner to speak on this?
I can speak on this one.
Mr. Gaffney.
Yep, so I can speak on that one. We approved that 700.
Are there any comments on this?
This is with regard to the network drive PDD for Sun Microsystems. This is where they were looking to put additional square footage buildings on the PDD.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Land use. Mr. Webb.
David Webb, Precinct 7, Land Use Chair. We voted 6-0 in favor of this.
Thank you. Zoning bylaw review. Any comments? Ms. Ellis.
Zoning Bylaw Review Committee voted 6-0 in favor.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. My name is Todd Fremont Smith. I'm with the Nordblom Company. Nordblom, as I think many of you know, but I see some new faces. We own everything from 2nd Avenue, which is Border Cafe, all the way up through the Burlington town line at Bedford. So all the way from 2nd Avenue, Northwest Park, 3rd Ave, and all the way up through Network Drive. I'm here to speak very briefly tonight about Network Drive, which is the former Sun Micro campus. We are doing very well on leasing. It is a PDD. We are getting very close to being out of square footage under the PDD, and so we're asking very simply a question tonight, which is, may we please build 3 or 4 new buildings at Network Drive, and I'll get to the details of that because the demand from the life sciences that's coming to us is quite significant. And then we're also asking for definitional change to move from net square footage to gross square footage because it makes it easier for everyone from the building department to the planning department and people like me to understand how many square feet are left in the zoning. But the big question is, when you think about Network Drive and that campus, inside the ring road, may we please build 3 or 4 new buildings, and we'll get to it as we get through here. So as I said, just for the newer members, Network Drive is on the left side of your screen. Again, Nordblom controls everything within the blue lines. Network Drive, go to the next. This is a view of the Network Drive campus. Route 3 is on your right. We're looking south now towards Route 128. And again, 3rd Avenue and Wegmans is at the top of the screen. It's all connected in one sort of ecosystem. The park is doing very, very well. Northwest Park is full, and Network Drive is now full. Just going back in history, this is before my time. It was originally a Lockheed Martin site. They would drive tanks around, test tanks. That was the first chapter of Network Drive. Second chapter is, I think, the second PDD in Burlington when Sun Microsystems came from California and took over the whole campus and built their master East Coast headquarters. That went on for a while. Sun suffered a decline. We were lucky enough to buy the site from Sun Microsystems brilliantly in the summer of 2007, and that's a real estate joke because that's right when the market crashed. We've been running it, we've been turning it into a mixed-use campus. It was very much a closed corporate surplus entity. We've been opening it up and turning it into a multi-tenant campus, and it is now leading the market. So this is what it looks like today, and I wouldn't blame you if you've never been there because it's just an office park, and a lot of the residents of Burlington, I think, don't even go here or really know where it is, but it's right up on Middlesex Turnpike where Bedford meets Burlington. We know that 75% of the tenants in this park come and go via Route 3. They just go right out to Route 3. But we've evolved, and not me, but our management team has worked hard for 10 years to turn this into really a college campus with all the amenities that we can think of, everything from walking paths to community gardens, golf simulators, indoor, outdoor spaces. Where you see the star today, if you just go back one, I'm sorry. Where you see the star today is where we're currently building a 270,000-foot lab building comprised of Vericel Corporation, which is moving its headquarters out of Kendall Square to Burlington, and also of note, the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, which is moving their entire genomics platform from Kendall Square to Burlington. So we're really shooting the lights out. This is an image of Broad's front door. We had a groundbreaking ceremony last Thursday. It was very well attended. All the scientists came out. They're thrilled to be coming to Burlington. And we know that just from market response that there are more companies in the market, science companies looking for new homes. There's just not enough space in Cambridge. They have to go outside of Cambridge. And the amenity package that Burlington has put together is really resonating in the market. That building opens in about 2 years. So if you see the Network Drive campus, okay, Middlesex Turnpike on the bottom here, Route 3 at the top. I'm sorry to keep changing these images, but I'm trying to find the best images, and sometimes they change. But it's really it's a connected college campus. But what we see now is we're out of space, and we have all these big parking lots. If you could just go back one, Amy, I'm sorry. You see these big parking lots, and those parking lots are what we're talking about, where we're talking about putting new buildings supported by structured parking. So we will not exceed the ring road in terms of development. So you see all the green space around the campus. We're not pushing outside the ring road. Everything's happening inside the ring road. That ring road, if you go to the next one, is known under the zoning as Parcel 1. So the amendment we're seeking tonight is to increase the allowable square footage inside Parcel 1. Parcel 2 under the zoning would not be changed. Again, parcel one, when I see this, I just see giant parking lots. I see the ability to grow the tax base without chopping down trees. All the infrastructure is in place. All the master drainage is in place. The electricity is here. We've got dual twin 13.8 electrical feeds from 2 different substations. Everything's in place here to continue the growth of the tax base. We've been working on sustainability. We've achieved LEED Gold on this campus. And Fitwell, 2-star Fitwell, and I'm told it's one of the only campuses in the country that's achieved a 2-star Fitwell designation. Adding more and more electric chargers. This is being driven by the market. More and more Teslas are showing up, so we're putting in more electrical chargers over time. And again, what you don't see from the parking lots in which I'd like to build buildings is that there are a lot of these nice green spaces inside the campus. That's the performance glade. We have community gardens. This is one of our most popular features, amenities on the campus. People grow things and take them home. We've got walking trails through the adjacent woods, which we continue to develop all the way down to Wegmans. We're trying to take up grass and put in, this is a flowering meadow pilot program that went very well. It's a lot cheaper for us to not irrigate these flowers, and it's better for the bees. In fact, we have bees on site. I don't like them, but they're there. We've talked, someone said, where does the honey go? We're going to try to collect the honey and give it to the local food pantry. But again, we're paying a lot of attention to upgrading public spaces, landscaped areas. There's a lot of money being spent up here to improve this campus. Frankly, from the office market's kind of soft right now, and we're trying to make sure that we create a leading environment in which people want to come to work and spend time here. The lab market, by contrast, which is growing, those people have to come to work. It's basically illegal to do lab work at home, so they have to come to work. And again, these are just some shots of the spaces in and around. So here's the ask. What we're asking for is approximately 450,000 square feet of additional square footage. Those buildings are about 150,000 feet each at Network Drive. They're big buildings. So what you should picture is just 3 more buildings up there somewhere. Maybe 4 if we do smaller buildings, but I'm thinking at this point 3 new buildings. We just leased the last building, 270,000 feet, which was on the market for an office building for 5 years. We redesigned it for life sciences, and it's gone. It's already gone. It's under construction. Each of those buildings is worth, I'll show you in a minute, about $6 a square foot under current taxes. So that's the ask. If you go to the next slide, we lost it. We'll go back. So here's a diagram showing in white all the buildings that are either there or under construction, and in blue we've tried to identify where and how and the scale of which 3 new buildings might go up there. And they fit very nicely right within the parking lots, right within the context of the park. Again, we won't be exceeding that ring road. Currently we're paying about $5.6 million, about $6 a square foot of annual taxes. The new building will pay about 1.6, that is, unless the assessor taxes it at a higher rate than office, which is probably likely. And if we got 450,000 feet of new space, there'd be another $2.7 million of annual real estate taxes coming from those life science buildings. So it would get us close to 10 million. And again, these are conservative numbers because office buildings have a net rent, which is about half of lab buildings. And I don't think it's going to take long for the assessor to catch up with me. So in summary, we feel this is infill development. All the utilities are there. The parking is there. We think it's the right location in town because most people come and go from Route 3. And we think from the Ways and Means vantage, it's a chance to grow the tax base and diversify into a more life science posture because, as I said, the office market is very squishy right now. We were honored to get recommendations from these boards. And that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's open it up for discussion. Any questions? Mr. Sinesi.
Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Move the question.
I've asked for reports from committees. You can vote this down if you just don't want to move the question. It's a 2/3 requirement. All those in favor of moving the question? Okay, opposed? What's that? There being less than 2/3 in favor, this motion fails. Let's go back to our discussion on this. Who wants to speak? Yes, go ahead.
Was that non-debatable? Was moving the question non-debatable?
Moving the question was non-debatable and it was voted. It failed. Mr. Boyven.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Boyven, Precinct 1. I have visited this site. It is extremely well designed. It's very popular, apparently, for people who are eager to move in and bring new science-type business to the community. As part of the Conservation Commission, I look at it where it's entirely infill development. They're turning it's all inside that ring road. They're going to be turning what is currently a vast amount of asphalt desert into better use with buildings and probably an increase in green space. So, you know, I think it's good financially for the community. I think it's good environmentally for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyven. Online, Ms. Warren.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Warren, Precinct 4. I think it is a great project for the town. I think it'll probably help some of the nearby businesses, the lunch crowd and so forth. But I think that it is going to have an adverse effect, and I speak for myself, on people that live near me. I don't think it is totally self-contained. I think that when Route 3 backs up, people take what is, I think is called the old Route 3, which is down Bedford Street, up Francis Wyman, and then on till Bill Recca, which I think goes all the way to Lowell. And so, you know, I think it's a great project. I just don't want it a half a mile from my house. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Warren. Further questions? Seeing none, I guess we should have moved the question. All those, we'll put this to a vote now. We have a poll ready, Amy. All those in favor? Opposed? There being a clear 2/3 majority in favor of this, this motion passes. This article passes.
That's it?
You're good.
Thank you
sir.
very much. I thought there were two. Sorry. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to stay there
No,
longer.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
I think Mr. Buckley is anxious to go home, so you're done. Which, jeez, too much freaking paper. Which brings us to Article 38. Planning Board recommendation and comments?
Sure.
Mr. Gaffney.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. 38 was a 7-0-0. The comment, again, this is a rezoning to the Innovation District, which is typical and with the health science area.
Thank you, Mr. Gaffney. Land use. Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Webb, Precinct 7, Land Use Chair. We voted 2 for and 4 against. So we did not support this primarily because we didn't think there's so many properties, people coming to us for zoning to the new innovative district rather than having a client in mind. So rather they just want to change the zoning, but there was no identified client for either of these properties.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Zoning bylaw review, Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Zoning Bylaw Review Committee did not vote on this as it's not a text amendment, it's just a rezoning, and that's not our purview. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, on behalf of the proponent.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. I'm here tonight actually on behalf of both the owners of 56 Middlesex Turnpike, which is Article 38, and 15 Adams Street, which is the following article, Article 39. Both of those property owners are looking to rezone their properties. The 56 Middlesex Turnpike property is currently zoned BG, which is general business. It's a 2.8 acre parcel of land with 450 feet of frontage on Middlesex Turnpike. Current use, for those who aren't familiar with it, is the Real School of Music is one of the tenants, and then there's also professional office space in there. Article 39, 15 Adams Street, is a 6.5 acre parcel of land off of Adams Street, 50 feet of frontage on Adams Street. Its current use, the owner of the property runs a wholesale air filtration product business there. That is currently zoned IG, which is general industrial. Both of these property owners are looking to rezone to the I district, as has been discussed. To land use is concerned about not having a specific project. That's true. Neither party does. The reason being is in this particular industry, and as the previous proponent alluded to, it's a pretty hot industry. Tenants won't look at you unless you're properly zoned. It's something that has to be acted on quickly, and they don't want to get into a negotiation process with a landlord and then have to wait 6 months to get before town meeting to get something rezoned. So it's a cart of the horse type of a situation, but that's the reality in this particular industry right now. Both of my clients don't have current tenants in mind. 56 Middlesex Turnpike is fully leased between the School of Music and professional office space. The other one is an owner-occupied business. However, they're both looking down the road, and they're both realizing that this the Innovation District is the wave of the future, and they're trying to get their ducks in order so they can take the next step. Both of these properties are immediately adjacent to the Millipore site, which is obviously a very large life sciences development up at the top of the hill there. Typically, with these types of uses, they like a campus use so that the different components of the business can be able to work with each other and interact with each other. My client's looking forward. Theoretically, if Millipore needed more space for their outfit, they could expand to one of these two sites. If my clients wanted to go out and just get site-specific tenants, there would frankly be smaller tenants than what you've been listening to, certainly than what's down at Network Drive. But there is a demand for smaller outfits as well. The 56 Middlesex Turnpike won the BG by rezoning it to the I district. He'd be able to keep professional office spaces in allowed use in the I district. The Real School of Music is an allowed use with a special permit, so he'd be able to continue with his current use without any problems. What it does do is take the possibility of retail out of there. Currently, it's a BG district. He could put retail in there. I think many people would agree that we probably don't need more retail along that stretch right now anyway. Traffic down there is poor enough as it is. The other property on Adams Street is currently zoned IG. Innovation District is a very similar zoning use, so he's not changing the use. It expands the use to life science a use which is not in an IG district. So that would be, as a practical matter, a very minimal rezoning, but it does open up the possibility of the life science use. Again, down in that area of town, granted it's further down the street from Network Drive, but that whole stretch of property in between Middlesex Turnpike and Route 3, many properties are going in that area, Millipore being a prime example at the top of the hill, and the Gutierrez Company has another property up there as well. So I would submit from a land use standpoint, it makes sense to have all these properties together in that particular use. It makes it easier to develop. I think from an anticipation of the commercial real estate market going forward, if you're not zoned to what the use is required out there, you're going to have a lot of empty buildings. So I think it's important that we allow our commercial tenants and commercial property owners to stay current with what the current trends are in the industries. So with that, it's a fairly straightforward request. The parties would like to rezone their properties from their current use into the I district and allow them to potentially market it to life science uses going forward. So with that, Mr. Moderator, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Okay, we'll open it up to the body. Comments or questions? Online, Ms. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard, Precinct 4. I don't know, it just seems like an incongruous and inappropriate rezoning for for buildings that are in a mostly retail section of town. It just, to me, it just doesn't fit. So I'm not sure that I don't agree with I do actually agree with the Land Use Committee that if they don't have a tenant for it or even potential tenants, I think that this should be voted down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willard. Ms. Willard, further questions? Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Precinct 3. I guess I'd like to hear more from maybe the planning board or planning director. We talked about innovation of campus type areas, and we talked about the more northern part of Middlesex Turnpike, and we talked about, is it Blanchard Road, and we talked about campus areas. This, to me, I agree with Ms. Willard that this is a retail kind of area, and if we want to have a plan to rezone that whole area, that's one thing, but if we're just, again, going to plunk one property here and another property there, there is height differences between retail and the innovation, so there's potential for, tall buildings next to short buildings, and it kind of creates a whole different outlook, and so I'm just not really certain that that's really been considered, and so I guess I have that question to the planning board or the planning staff. Thank you.
Ms. Kastner, would you care to address that issue?
I certainly can, but if any of the planning board members are waving their hands, I want to give them the opportunity.
I think they're ducking the question and giving it to you.
Okay. No, that's fine. I just know you wanted to centralize who was speaking. So, so for this, so 15 Adams Street is currently a use that actually is doing quite a bit of work in Burlington with there's just the air filtration systems that all of these life science companies do need. That Garfield Circle, Adams Street, that area is definitely a what's next type of area. I mean, there's a lot of interesting incubator spaces there, and as I've said before, of these kind of like open warehouse spaces actually evolving into like this interesting educational areas as well, which is nice. But anyway, this whole area is kind of a what's the next chapter here. So And the 56 Middlesex Turnpike does back up into the Millipore site, albeit it's definitely an elevation change there. So in terms of, if you're asking my opinion in terms of when you're looking at these sites and clustering these sites, I think especially retail nodes are going to, what we're seeing is kind of definitely a pulling back into, the mall area, the Middlesex Commons area, that kind of the offshoots are fading in, or kind of fading away and are locating closer to the higher density retailer areas. So I'm not particularly worried about kind of losing that retail, those particular sites to retail. As mentioned, there's a lot of continued opportunity on those sites with the allowed uses. I just, I feel like we've done quite a bit of work in the innovation district. We're not the proponent, the property owners are the proponent for sure, but in terms of kind of a planning perspective, if you're looking at how these are going to evolve into something else, I think that district gives some interesting options. But certainly up to the body to decide. And I would welcome the proponents to respond to the question if the moderator so chooses. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kastner. Ms. Hughes.
Betsy Hughes, Precinct 7. This is actually in our precinct, so I have some concerns following up with what Sherry talked about in terms of the allowable heights, et cetera, in that part of town. As we all know, traffic's pretty bad, and what we don't want to have happen is have larger buildings where biotech people actually do go to work, so we would get more traffic. We also heard in the past about the desirability for campus, walkability, et cetera. There is nothing walkable about Middlesex Turnpike in that area, and to put any sort of area businesses with numbers of employees going in and out on a daily basis would make it even more choked than it is today. So I would encourage some of you all to think about that and vote this down.
Any further questions? Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Frank Monaco, Precinct 4. I actually understand what some of the negative comments are about, but I don't think it makes sense. The Innovation District, number one, is a direction we want to go in. And in that area, to pull out what's obviously overly congested retail, I mean, the nightmare there is because of the retail, and you've got to have traffic cops and duty officers just to get in and out of there between Bed Bath & Beyond and the School of Music and everything. This is most likely to be an improvement to that, number one. And number two, it's the kind of businesses that we need to bring in, and that corridor is developing very nicely into a community of this type of industry, which is, it's not an industrial negative. Lab spaces don't employ tens of thousands of people. If you've got 50 people in a pretty big lab, that's a lot. So I just don't see the problem with actually letting this migrate where the industry is trying to go in a corridor that is, I think, fairly well suited for what we're trying to do here. That area of the Middlesex Turnpike has always been problematic, and I think, if anything, this would improve it. And I do live around there, and I do drive through there a lot, and I understand. But I don't think it's a reason to vote this down. In fact, I think it's a reason to go in this direction. The other point I want to make is, if you had a tenant in tow while you're doing the rezoning, we just get through blowing something up for that very reason. We want the zoning to be right, and we want the zoning to be put in place, and then we get tenants. And furthermore, if you bring a tenant in tow and you do the zoning change, there's nothing that guarantees you that that tenant leaves and another one comes in. So you got to be careful how you try to do your picking and choosing. First and foremost, you want to get the zoning right. I think the zoning is favorable for this area, and certainly for what we need to improve our commercial opportunities in that corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monaco. Ms. Willard, your hand is still up. Do you have further comments?
I do, but I'll keep them to myself. Thank you.
No, thank you. Ms. Glantz, online. Unmute Lori, please.
Yep, Bill, I just found the unmute button. So thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lori Glantz, Precinct 1. I am curious as to if Mr. Murphy or someone else could speak to the effect that changing this to an innovation district would have a positive effect on, you know, relieving the tax burden that the residents pay. Is there more of an incentive for the, you know, tax relief to happen with innovation district versus the general industrial district? And in terms of having the innovation district pass, I would think that looking at what those companies could contribute to the schools, could, you know, contribute to the community at large, it seems like we would want to incentivize these companies to come to town. And I do understand the traffic issue, but I also want to look at this from a tax base and, you know, maybe these companies could contribute to the schools and increase the learning, you know, abilities of our students in some fashion or another.
Mr. Moderator, in response, tax rate is based on valuations. Obviously, a new life science building, I think, would be more valuable than an existing warehouse, especially if the company using the warehouse goes out of business and it's just an empty building. So, you know, the higher the valuation, the higher the taxes that are going to come into the town coffers. And I'm sure, like many of our commercial residents do, they support the local education, they support local charities, they support local things of that nature. So I'm sure this wouldn't be any different. I'd also just like to mention one thing. There was the concern about Middlesex Turnpike in that area not being walkable. That's certainly true. But I would submit that as that area starts to get renovated and rehabilitated, that's where you get opportunities to make improvements in the infrastructure. When a proponent comes before the planning board, for instance, to get the necessary approvals to put a large project such as that in, the planning board has the ability to request sidewalks, to request traffic lights, to request infrastructure improvements that will help the town absorb whatever the additional use might be. So I think encouraging reinvestment down there is the only way to get improvement down there. You know, as Mr. Monaco stated, this is obviously an industry where there's growth again, speaking to the 15 Adams Street one, that's just a big old warehouse that's being used to ship out air filtration products. Putting something of more value and more pertinent use in there is certainly going to expand the value of that property going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. This new innovation with the life sciences and biotech, what we're going through right now is what we went through 20 years ago when we had office development in the town. That whole area along the Nordblum property, that was all research and development, and we really openly welcomed all of these office parks that come into town. It was these office parks that helped the general businesses down there. It's a trickle-down effect. If people don't go into the office, they're not going to support the restaurants and the retail and all the small businesses. So let's just think of this new biotech move that's coming into town now at the lab space. Nothing different than something a little different than we had coming in before. Office space is not the way to go. It's not that attractive of a piece of property down there. But if he gets the right tenants to come in there, and I believe they need to get the zoning before they get the tenant, I think when the tenants come in there, they're going to help spend a lot of money down there to make their area, like Mr. Murphy said, easier to walk around and things of that nature. The Burlington Mall itself, look how the changes, we gave them zoning back in September because we need to do something different at the Burlington Mall that we've been doing for the last 40 or 50 years. So this is no different. We just need to change some of these properties, rezone some of these properties so they can come back up to where we should be now in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tucci. Anything further? Seeing nothing, we'll put Article 38 to vote. All those in favor of Article 38? All those opposed? There being 11 people opposed, there's a clear two-thirds majority, and Article 38 passes. Let's move on to Article 39. Planning Board vote.
Planning Board vote 7-0-0 on Article 39. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Land Use Committee, Mr. Webb.
Dave Webb, Land Use Committee. I already said we voted 2-4 on both of these articles.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this article? Seeing none, let's put this to a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. There being 5 votes against, there's a clear two-thirds. Article 39 passes. Article 40 has been withdrawn. Adjourn? Well, how about a motion to come back next Monday? I heard a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? Again, who cares about those online? Thank you all for being here. Look forward to seeing everyone here in person come September.